IB Nation, welcome to another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. It's Monday. That dude's with me, so y'all know what that means. It's Notre Dame Recruiting Hour. I'm joined by Ryan Roberts, the Director of Recruiting at Irish Breakdown, and we're going to break. Ryan, we've been wanting to do this for a month. Like every time we would, like some kind of news would break. So we actually had kind of a clean week and a clean weekend. So for Notre Dame, at least that is. And so we're actually going to get to finally start talking about the 2025 class a little bit. So we're going to start a series today, kind of introing people to the 2025 class over the next about a month and a half, couple months. This is what a lot of our recruiting shows will be about. And today, Ryan, we're going to talk about the running backs. And it's an interesting board. It's an interesting year for Notre Dame. But I got to start with, we'll kind of start off each of these shows with just sort of a, what has led us into where we are, right? And so I'm doing this on the site a little bit. It's sort of a state of the recruiting sort of thing. And so we'll briefly introduce that as part of these shows, Ryan. And you look at running back recruiting, and it has been an incredible roller coaster at Notre Dame, depending on who the coach is, basically is what it's boiled down to. Things were looking a little bleak there with the previous running backs coach. Well, two coaches away. When Autry Denson was at Notre Dame, recruiting struggled. There were some really bad misses. And then Lance Taylor comes along. His first class, they land Chris Tyree. Next year, they get Audric Estime, Logan Diggs. It was, again, one of those weird turns. They had a bad miss with Will Shipley, overcame that bad miss, ended up being pretty good, pretty well off with Logan Diggs and Audric Estime. Follow that up with Jadarian Price. Then along comes Dylan McCullough. He brings in Jabron Payne, another four-star back, then goes out and lands Jeremiah Love, which was a huge pickup. Notre Dame's already got two commitments in the 2023 class in Kedron Young and Aeneas Williams, and now we head into 2025. So it was interesting, Ryan. There's this thing out there that people say, well, it doesn't really matter who the coaches are. Notre Dame has all these restrictions, and I've always said, no, it's a lot about the coaches. Right. And a perfect example is what we've seen at running back. For like 3 years, people would tell me, well, top running backs just aren't interested in going to class. They're just not interested in going up north. They're just not interested in this excuse and that excuse. And then lo and behold, a competent recruiter gets hired and Notre Dame starts recruiting running back at an incredibly high level. And I would argue, Ryan, over the last 5 years that Notre Dame is I would say, one of the 5 best schools in the country when it comes to consistently stocking their depth chart. So things I would say, Ryan, are certainly trending in a good direction when it comes to Notre Dame recruiting at the running back position. And it's now 2 coaches in a row that have really been able to get this done.
Yeah, I mean, obviously we're hyper-focused on Dylan McCullough and the impact that he has because unlike some other positions for Notre Dame's coaching staff, never had any questions about the effort and the prowess that you have from a recruiting perspective. Obviously, Dylan McCullough brings great background, from coaching a little bit of a lower level to coaching the University of Indiana and coaching some really good running backs there to coaching at USC. And then obviously in the Super Bowl with the Kansas City Chiefs, he brings, I think, kind of all avenues of it, which is kind of interesting, right? He has the pro experience. He has the college experience. He has a reputation as an evaluator. He has a reputation of also recruiting the underrated guys, getting the guys like the Tevin Colemans of the world to be able to come to Indiana and to become great players. And then dealing with a former high 4-star caliber running back and a Ronald Jones at USC and developing him into a great football player. So I think when you're talking about the running back position for me, for Notre Dame, for the foreseeable future, especially with Dylan McCullough at the helm, it's hard not to be excited because not only is he going to get very talented running backs that we've already seen, he's going to coach them up and he's going to develop them properly and he's going to utilize them well. So it's really the best of all areas with a guy like Dylan McCullough and the state of running back recruiting right now.
So when you look at running back recruiting right now, Ryan, obviously they have recruited highly ranked players. They've recruited guys with very impressive film. They've recruited guys with impressive offer lists, like all the things that people look for, all these kids have. When you look at sort of recent seasons, for example, Logan Diggs was actually the lowest ranked kid that they've landed in the last several years. Chris Tyree was a top 100 player. Audric Estime ended up being like a top 150. I think Rivals had him as high as like 139 or something like that. Then you look at 2022, Jadarian Price was still underrated, but was still a top 250 guy. Jabron Payne was a 4-star back, even with the injuries his last 2 years. Jeremiah Love he was on the on-3 consensus and the 247 composite. He was a top 100 back. I think only one service had him outside the top 100, I believe. I think there was actually one that actually ranked him outside of the top 100, which is just says everything you need to know about recruiting rankings. I'm actually going to look that up. Yeah, Rivals had him at number 129. Everybody else had him inside the top 100. Then, of course, Aeneas Williams is a top 250 caliber kid. Rivals has him the top 200. Keidron Young is in the top 100 by on 3, even though they dropped him down 10 spots. Whatever. He's still top 100. So there's been a lot of talent, Ryan, that they've been able to land. But the other thing that I like about the recruiting at running back is it's not a bunch of the same guy. There are at least 3 distinctly different types that they've landed. There's sort of the all-purpose slashers. Look at Chris Tyree. You look at Aeneas Williams. There's the bigger physical downhill back. That's Audric Estime, Logan Diggs, Keidron Young. There's the fast slasher and Jeremiah Love. And then you look at a guy like Jabron Payne, who's more of a true back that fits into a couple different categories a little bit. I wouldn't fit him into any of those. And I think that's an important part of this too, Ryan, is they're not just bringing in the same type. So if there's a situational change in a game, if there's a scheme adjustment, you've got backs can do a lot of different things. And you and I have talked a lot about Notre Dame's need to have a more diverse run game. It's hard to do that if all your backs are the same exact guy. And I think that's a big factor into the evaluation of the running back position as well.
Well, I think that when you look at the 2023 season, it's going to be really interesting to see the mix of backs just on the field perspective, because obviously who Audric Estime is at this point, but Logan Diggs transferring, I think that it's going to open up some opportunities for those different skill sets. Like a Logan Diggs and an Audric Estime were a lot closer of football players from a style perspective compared to what Jadarian Price and Audric Estime are going to be, for instance, right? So if Jadarian Price is able to be back healthy, Jeremiah Love's able to come in and give you something, and then Jabron Payne continues the momentum that he was able to build in the spring, then you look at the backs and say, all those guys are pretty different, right? Like some of them do similar things, but they all bring kind of a different skill set to the table. And I think that's best exemplified by the 2024 class that Notre Dame currently has. You already mentioned having Keidron Young and Aeneas Williams. Those guys are polar opposites as running backs, but together they have the opportunity to be a really potent duo potentially at Notre Dame in the long run. And when you look at the 2025 board that Notre Dame's working with early, same thing, Brian. Like, you're not talking about the same types of backs. You're not talking about, 7 cookie cutters. You're talking about guys that bring very different and unique skill sets to the table. And I think that's going to be really interesting to see who Notre Dame really zeroes in on and really makes a strong push for, because I think that's going to be very telling more of what they currently have on the roster and what they feel like they need more of from a style perspective.
I think this 24 class was important too for Notre Dame because there were numbers concerns because of some misses that they've had in the class, right? Or in the past. And then obviously Logan Diggs leaving, and then Chris Tyree moving to receiver to fill a need there. So your misses at one position kind of caused you to have to take from this position. Then you lose Logan Diggs. There's some injury concerns. So this is not a perfect scenario. That's why you needed to go get Devin Ford. That's why he was needed to be added to the class. It's also why it was really important that they go for 2 in this class. So I think bringing 2 legit talented backs help Notre Dame get into a situation at running back where they can now look and say, okay, we're 1 a year now, and then occasionally 2 if the right kid comes along, or if we have a loss on the current roster, we're okay. We can then simply reshift focus. And I think that's an important part of this too. So let's transition to the 2025 class, Ryan. If you don't land Keidron Young, there's a must to get 2 backs in the 2025 class. Because you got Keidron Young to go with Aeneas Williams, who committed last summer, you're in a situation now where Notre Dame really only has to focus on 1 back. Although, if it was up to me, Ryan, I would say even if you get it back this summer, I would still recruit 2 because of the fact that Audric is a guy that could end up going pro after this year. I actually kind of hope that he does, because that means he has a big year. And then number 2 is there are some injury concerns on the current roster. So even though one right now is the need, Ryan, even if they get one soon, I would still stay on some of the top backs that are on the board for Notre Dame. What would you say about that strategy, Ryan?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that especially when you talk about the shelf life of the running back position, I know that's more of a talking point in NFL circles, but I mean, there's a lot of running backs in the modern college game, and it's due to that short shelf life that 3 years and you're done, man, right? Like 3 years, go to the NFL. And honestly, if you can, more power to you, right? Like, I mean, to your point, if Audric Estime has a great year this year, runs for 1,000 yards, is highly productive, even takes a step as a football player, remains somewhat healthy, and he's able to go pro as a third-year player, go do it, man. Like I always tell running backs, like if you can cash in early, go do it, because the shelf life is just so small, so short. And honestly, again, I think that Jadarian Price has a chance to come back and be as strong as ever, hopefully stronger than ever. I think that Jeremiah Love can be a guy that can come in and really do great things. But 2 of your top 3 to 4 backs right now, when you're talking about Jadarian Price and Jabron Payne, have had injuries, obviously. And anytime a running back has an injury, especially an Achilles injury, and then 2 lower body injuries for Jabron Payne, that's a little bit concerning. It is. And obviously when you have a nice stable of backs, when you're 4+ deep at the position, maybe there's not as much wear and tear on some guys, but still, anytime you have the lower body injuries, it is a massive concern. So yes, if you get one soon, stay on them. Not just one guy. I would stay on a few of these guys that are on the board, because I think there's some really talented backs in 2025, and I think that you're in a pretty decent spot with a couple of them. At least there's intrigue from a lot of players that are on the board right now for Notre Dame.
So we're going to dive into that board, Ryan. We're going to talk about 5 guys right now. We're going to discuss sort of their recruitments, where things stand, who the top targets are. Then we'll dive into some film afterwards. But when you look at the board, first and foremost, Ryan, Notre Dame offered 13 running backs this year, or in the early going. Some guys I think are a little bit debatable. Is that a running back? Is he another position? There's some guys like that, but that are at other positions. But right now we have 13 guys listed as running backs. 2 of them have committed. That's Anthony Rogers, who's committed to Alabama, and Gideon Davidson, a player Notre Dame was very high on, who committed to Clemson. And so there was a kid that earned an offer this summer. Daniel Anderson came to campus, did a great job at Notre Dame's camp this summer. We'll talk about him a little bit. Torrey Blaylock's kid from Texas that's on the board. We won't spend a lot of time on him. We'll talk about Waltez Clark from Florida. We'll talk about Usman Kromah from Georgia. We'll talk about James Simon from Louisiana and Justin Thurman from Florida. They've also offered Jayshon Lamar, who is Jade Lamar's younger brother. We're not going to spend any time on that one. Obviously, when an older brother decommits, there's not going to be a push for the younger sibling in most instances. So we won't spend a whole lot of time on that one. There's some other backs that Notre Dame has offered that they're just not really in on right now. Deir Hill's a guy that we don't see Notre Dame really pushing for right now. He's a kid with an offer. I think you and I discussed this the other day.
Yep.
So we're going to focus on 5 guys during our show. And that is Justin Thurman, as we said, Usman Kromah, James Simon, Waltez Clark, and Daniel Anderson. That'll be the focus today. And we're going to focus first, Ryan, and talk about the first guy, which is Justin Thurman from Tampa Jesuit. This is one of the more intriguing players on the board.
Yep.
He is one of the most talented athletes on the board at any offensive position in the 25 class. Also one of the least productive so far, because he had an older back at their high school last year that was a good player, is now going on to play college ball. This is his opportunity to kind of come in and kind of take over that position. And when you look at Justin Thurman and you think about the fact that this is a kid that didn't really rush for a whole lot of yards last year, not a kid that's necessarily established from a production standpoint, and yet he's a 4-star by 2 outlets, and and another outlet ranks him as a top 300 player. Another ranks him number 236. And then you look at his offer list. He's got an offer from Florida. He's got an offer from Tennessee, obviously Notre Dame, Iowa, NC State. So he has an impressive early offer list. Auburn has offered him, Louisville. So good early offer list for a kid that hasn't played a whole lot. Notre Dame had him on campus this summer. Did great. They had already offered him, I believe. Correct, Ryan? They offered him a while ago.
Correct. Yep.
Did a great job at the camp. And coming out of that camp, it was established that this is a guy that the Notre Dame staff is high on. So Why do they like him as much? Obviously, the little bit of film that he does have will show was impressive. His track times are outstanding. But when he came on campus this summer and performed in front of the coaches at the evaluation camp, that solidified his standing as a guy that the Notre Dame staff likes a lot. Now, you've had a chance to talk to him several times. I know Brian Smith is in the chat today. He's had a chance to talk to Justin a couple times. Just discuss a little bit, Ryan, with the folks where things stand with Justin Thurman. What are some things you've learned about him and his recruitment during your conversations with him?
Well, it's not hard to figure out why people are ranking him that high without the production right now. He's only obviously going into his junior year, but you bet on those traits all day, right? I mean, that kid is incredibly explosive. He went to the camp a few weeks ago, and he was one of the fastest kids there from a Notre Dame perspective. He has a reported high 30 in the vertical. He has a 10 plus broad jump. This kid's an explosive cat, man. 10.84, I believe 10.84 was his time as a junior, as a sophomore this past year in the 100 meters. Really talented kid. And when you talk to him, and I know Brian Smith can attest to this in the chat, it's easy to see why he's so high on Notre Dame, man. Like, it is. He's a really, really smart, well thought out, appreciative kid. And the one thing that I love about him is he could just rest on his athleticism and just blow up this year, and everything will be gravy, right? From an offer perspective, he's going to get all the looks. He's been a grinder on the trail this offseason. He's going to camps and earning his offers consistently, which I absolutely love. So where things stand, obviously, in this one is Notre Dame, once they saw him in person, saw how athletic and explosive he was, that kind of matched the limited film that he had. It's basically become that this kid is a priority in this class. And Justin is very high on Notre Dame. He's going to be making the return visit to Notre Dame this month for the barbecue on July 30th. Second visit to Notre Dame, counting obviously the camp a few weeks ago. Man, I just think that this one couldn't be trending in a much better direction for the University of Notre Dame. He's talked about next couple months is kind of his deciding period here that's coming up, right? His decision. He's talked to a lot of these coaches. Now he's getting into much deeper conversations, the real fit, the school aspects, all that great stuff. Fits Notre Dame tremendously. And I couldn't like how more this is trending for Notre Dame from a Justin Thurman perspective.
So when you look at it and you start talking about, okay, well, why would Notre Dame be targeting Justin Thurman over some of the other backs on the board? Kid hasn't produced a whole lot. He's, there's some, obviously you need to see a kid do it. There's really a couple reasons, Ryan. And one, it boils down to when you recruit the way that they've done already in the last few years, you get into a position, and this is ultimately the position you want to be in, where it's no longer about, okay, we have to get numbers, or we have to get this, we have to get that. You're at the position now where you can say, hey, look, we're in a pretty good position. Let's now recruit for something that maybe is a skill set that we'd like to add to the class. And I think one thing the staff has focused a lot on, and in 22, they did it obviously with Jadarian Price.
Yep.
They did it again in 23 with Jeremiah Love, Keydron Young last year. They're looking for guys that can hit home runs. And from an upside potential standpoint, there's not many better home run hitters on the board. And I think with the fact that Aeneas has every down back potential, even though I like him as a dual threat guy, Keydron has every down potential, Jabron Payne has every down skill, Jeremiah Love has every down skill. I kind of get the sense that Notre Dame is looking for a guy that brings a little bit of a niche and a guy that, in my opinion, can do more with less. Because there was a discussion in the chat about, somebody's going to leave. Well, the one way to make sure that some guys don't leave is to recruit the different type of skill set so guys can fill different roles. And when you have a guy that can do a lot with a little, Aeneas Williams is that way to a degree, in my opinion, and Justin Thurman is certainly that way. It's kind of like I envision him potentially serving like a Dexter Williams role, where he doesn't need more than 6 or 7 carries in a game to make an impact. And that's how Dexter was in 2016, 2017, before he became the lead guy in 2018. And so I see a little bit of that. But the difference is this kid has a lot more just raw speed than Dexter. Dexter had really good football speed and a great first step. Justin brings some of that to the table, Ryan. And that's why I think that this is a kid, and he's a running back. I don't know that he catches the ball necessarily well enough to be a guy you'd consider doing like what Chris Tyree did. I think there's other guys on the board that you would move, or other guys on the roster and incoming roster that you would consider before that. Catches the ball well enough, though, that he's a weapon out of the backfield. So I think what you're seeing here is the thought of this kid brings a skill set that not many people have, which is just home run hitter. Meaning we don't need to feed him 20 times a year after getting Kedron Young and then 2 years after getting Jeremiah Love. And to me, that's why I think making Justin Thurman such a priority actually makes a ton of sense for Notre Dame, despite the lack of production. What say you, Mr. Roberts?
I would also add in, Brian, not only the home run impact from a running back perspective, he's also a really good kick returner too. So you're loading up on guys. I mean, think about Jeremiah Love last year. I mean, we're talking about Jeremiah Love coming in this year, and even if he's not a focal point of the offense, it's like, let's get him some returns, right? Like, let's get him involved in special teams. Let's find a niche for his role because he brings that home run hitter speed that you're talking about. And I think Justin might even bring more of it potentially. Because again, we're talking about a sophomore in high school that is now going to be a junior. I mean, this kid is legitimately probably going to be a 10.5 or lower 100-meter guy by the time he's a senior in high school. And he's a legit, I mean, he reports a 4.31 in the 40. Again, you know, we could argue about semantics of like a legitimate 4.31, sure, but regardless, he's a 4.4 something kid for sure. I mean, this kid can absolutely fly. So having that niche, having that role. And what did we love last year? We loved seeing a lot of 12 personnel last year. I mean, 21 personnel, excuse me, where we're seeing two backs on the field. I am dreaming about the opportunity of maybe a couple years from now having Kedron Young and a Justin Thurman, if he chooses to come to Notre Dame, on the field at the same time, because there could be a lot of different possibilities to utilize that skill sets.
And throwing Aeneas Williams in there too, who you can line up in the slot and play receiver. I mean, you could literally, and again, I don't know if we'll ever see this or how often we'd see it if they did do it, but you could literally go 30 personnel and be effective, right? Yes. With two backs, 30 personnel, you know, it's back, tight ends, receivers. So the first two numbers are the number of backs and tight ends, and then there's, you know, whatever's left over to get to 5 is what you have a receiver. Well, 30 personnel would be 3 backs, no tights, and a receiver. You could go 30 personnel, 31 personnel. And let's just say you put, you know, let's say the 25 classes arrived. You got Nate Roberts on the field, or Cooper Flanagan, or whoever. Maybe Holden Stace and those guys are still around. Jack Larson, whatever the case may be. But you have a tight end. You go 31 personnel. You could have your tight end attached, have a receiver outside, and put like a Jeremiah Love at the other receiver spot, and have Kedron Young and Justin Thurman in there as one of your backs. Or you could put Aeneas Williams out there. Or, I mean, there's so many different things you can do. And if you just look at these 2 years in a row, these last 2 classes, which is wild because Jeremiah Love will be a junior when this class shows up on campus. It's just crazy how I keep saying this, but it's still nuts to think about.
We're probably going to be talking about, oh man, Jeremiah, this might be the last year of Jeremiah Love.
Right.
So 2026, you need to start killing it, man. Yeah, exactly.
But if you look at the 2 classes in a row, I mean, you could legitimately put 30 personnel on the field and feel like, hey, we can do some stuff here. Right. And in the pass game and run game. And that's the unique aspects about it. So I love the complementary skills that these kids bring to the table. And obviously now Notre Dame's got to seal the deal. It's not done yet, Ryan. He is going to come up for a visit, I believe, again. Yes. Right. So how do you see things going when the visit comes up? And do you think this is one that could get into a situation of where this thing is kind of over with?
Yeah, I think that for me, because I already mentioned July 30th for the Notre Dame recruiting barbecue, Justin is making the trip back up, which will be his second visit to campus. Obviously, the first one was during the camp. This one will be much more about actually enjoying the recruiting experience a little bit more, you know, being able to hang out with the coaches a little bit more from a personal perspective and not as much an on-field coaching perspective, which would be great. And when I talked to him 2 weeks ago when I had him on the podcast, he talked to me about the next couple months, the next 2 months are going to be big for him to be able to have those deep conversations with the coaching staffs that are coming after him, with his parents, obviously, who also did make the trip up during that camp. So both parents have seen campus, which I think is also very important. If you're asking me, and you know, for the timeline perspective, It seems like 2 months is kind of the decision-making process that's going to happen here, but I wouldn't be shocked if it's a little bit quicker than that. If Notre Dame does a great job having him on campus and it really just spurs that feeling again, this is Notre Dame's to win. Like Archer, I know, asked in the comments about like who are the main competition for the guys, and a couple of them will be able to name some guys. But for Justin Thurman, it's like Notre Dame's the clear leader right now. I mean, like make no ifs, ands, or buts about that. Like they are the clear leader, and if they have a great visit with him on the 30th, I think they have a chance to close this one out. Will he finish the process of the 2 months? I guess it's always possible, but I could see that one escalating a lot quicker and that decision-making process being pushed up a little bit.
Well, I just want to quickly throw out some comparisons, sophomore number comparisons of track. I'm not going to compare him to Micah Bell because there's really that's an unfair comparison. Like that's as much about as world-class as you can be for a high school track athlete.
What's wild about Micah Bell is you could talk about the running numbers, Brian, but like I don't know if you noticed in my Cam Williams article, he actually had a longer long jump than Cam Williams, who just had the 11th furthest jump in the country. Like that's just wild.
Yes, I mean Micah Bell's been running 10.4 since he was a sophomore, right? I mean, so his numbers are a little nutty. But I wanted to compare Justin Thurman to Braden Lindsey, a guy that I think has a similar build lengthwise. So they're different. I mean, Justin's more built like a running back upper body, but as far as leg strides is kind of what I'm referring to. As a sophomore in high school, Braden Lindsey ran a 10.86 in the 100-meter dash and a 22.87 in the 200-meter dash. And he was a 2-time state champion in 200-meter dash. And then Justin Thurman, as a freshman, or as a sophomore, ran a 10.87 in a 22.65. So when you look at those numbers, for example, very similar. Their speed numbers are very similar. I think we would all agree that a running back that has the speed that Braden Lindsey brought to the table is a pretty good football, pretty dynamic player with pretty dynamic speed.
Yes. I mean, we were talking about just wanting to see Braden Lindsey tested the pro day just to test. Because, I mean, I think the over-under would be 4.4 flat, right? Could he be a 4.38 guy? Like, possible, right? Like, it's very possible. So, yeah, man. Justin Thurman, comparative to where some players are as sophomores, kid can fly. And when we turn on the film, it's going to be very easy to see just how fast this young man is.
Yep. Not the only top back that they're going after, Ryan. Notre Dame is actually recruiting and doing well with Usman Kromah from Georgia. Completely 100% different back than Justin Thurman. Justin Thurman is listed at 6 foot 180. Usman is 6'1", listed at 6'1", 210. I don't know if I necessarily buy the 6'1". Brian Smith could tell us a little bit better than that. But honestly, I don't care about height for a running back. I care about the 210 plus. Very, very well-built kid. Has some Audric Estime to him frame-wise, Ryan. Top 200 back. Actually, I think some people have him, I believe, in the top 100. I believe. I haven't looked at his ranking for a while.
As they should. They should, yeah.
You know how much I obsess over rankings, so it's been a minute. But yeah, he's a consensus top 100 player. Ranked as high as number 14 by On3. Lowest ranking is number 84 by 247 Sports. So very talented back. Georgia offered, Bama offered, Tennessee offered. Getting him out of the state of Georgia will be tough. Yes. But as you have learned and as Brian Smith has learned firsthand, this is a kid that has a very strong early opinion of Notre Dame, partly because of the pedigree and all that goes along with it, but also partly because it shows the importance of having a dynamic recruiting coach at a position.
I mean, that's said very well. And obviously they had been out to see Usman a couple of times, obviously in the open period when they're able to visit the schools. And I think that for me, Brian, like this one is just get this kid to campus, man. I mean, from the early conversations we've heard from Brian Smith, obviously reporting, speaks very highly of Notre Dame, right? Which is a great foundational step. But to your point, it's a Georgia kid. Getting him out of SEC country is not going to be the easiest thing in the world. We all know that, right? But getting a kid like this to campus early when he's not even in junior year yet, I think could be big for this process. Because, I mean, I've seen this kid, and I know Brian saw him in person, and I agreed with what he said, talked about him a little bit from a personal perspective. A little bit of a tight back, but, man, he's explosive downhill. Like, this is one of those kids that's like he's a runaway freight train. Like, Good luck.
You just described Audric Estime.
Yeah,
I
pretty
mean,
much,
Audric
man.
Estime is not a guy that's going to go win a bunch of, hip twisting contests, right? I mean, so that's the thing is like you're recruiting him to fill that same role, to be
Yeah.
that same kind of that's a downhill, that's a duo inside zone
Yes.
counter back that you run a toss to and let him plant and get vertical as
Yes.
well. What I liked, Ryan, is he doesn't catch the ball a ton from what I saw in his high school film, but he does catch it clean. So this is also a kid that you can get the ball in space and the screen game and do some things with as well. So very talented back, one of the better backs that I've seen so far in the 2025 class, and a kid that Notre Dame is in on. Now, this is kind of what I was referring to earlier. Like when I'll just be honest,
Yeah.
when I talk about if you're able to land a back early, there's only one back that they may land early, and that's Justin Thurman. Now they got to close during the upcoming visit, and I'm not saying this is a done deal. He's not a done deal. This isn't a silent commit situation that we really know about, that we're just not saying you've got to close on Justin Thurman. And other schools are starting to try to ramp things up because they see that, to Ryan's point earlier, they see that Notre Dame is just they're making a run at him. If we want to get in this thing, we better get in this thing now.
Yeah.
Notre Dame's got to make sure that they don't allow that to happen and close the deal on him, right? So when I talked about, if you can get a kid now, that would be it. That's the guy that you hope that Notre Dame can get now. And then when I said in my head, recruit other backs, this is the first one that I had in my head, because Usman Kromah is one of those kids that you look at, Ryan, and you say, do you need him? Depends on what you mean by need. Do you need him from a number standpoint? No. But you always need a back as good as Usman Kromah, Ryan. There's no doubt about it.
Yeah, and if you're talking about, especially in a hypothetical where if Notre Dame gets Justin Thurman early and you're trying to get the second back, is there a better compliment to what Justin Thurman does than Usman Kromah? I mean, honestly, the kid, to your point, completely different running backs, completely different. I mean, my Audric Estime is a great comparison for Usman. My other comparison would just be a runaway freight train. Like that's just what he is, man. Like it's absolutely insane watching his film. When I watch, he was one of those kids, Brian. I had the same thought process with Rowan Byrne, who obviously I know we'll have an interview with later. Rowan Byrne, I watched his film and I'm like, at first I was like, that's got to be a senior, right? Like they're just so physically advanced for their age, right? And then you see Usman, and even the clip I know that Brian Smith shared, I'm just like, that kid looks like he's a freshman in college. Like, what are we doing here right now? I mean, that kid is physically well put together. Excited to watch his film, especially on this show, because Usman can go, man. He's again, long speed is not exceptional, but I think he gets up to top speed pretty well, and he's a very, very powerful runner. So yes, very high on Usman.
Those aren't the only two guys on the board right now, Ryan. Obviously, Notre Dame is recruiting some other players, and one guy that I want to talk about is a very talented player from the state of Louisiana. That is James Simon. Notre Dame was down to see him, I believe, multiple times in the most recent evaluation period, Ryan. So let's talk a little bit about James Simon, where things stand with him. We'll dive into the film here in a little bit, but certainly a player that Notre Dame has a lot of interest in.
Yeah, I had an update on him last week, or maybe it was the week prior. But I mean, basically, where you are with James is a Louisiana guy. So again, we're in the same conversation of getting a kid out of the Southeast, right? We're in that same type of conversation. But I'll say this, James Simon, because there's some kids that you talk to where it's just like they have no interest in Notre Dame, like zero, like zero. There's just none. I think there's a lot of intrigue there. I do. I mean, James says all the right things about Notre Dame, was very complimentary, talked about Dylan McCullough and just kind of, his approach to him. And the consistency has been absolutely phenomenal. Not only the couple times they were able to visit him down there, but consistent conversation and communication when obviously they're allowed to. So all that in mind is I think that there's intrigue for James, but James has never been up to see South Bend, obviously, right? And until that happens, I just won't feel much about this one because, unfortunately, I asked James straight up. I'm like, hey, man, top schools. Who are the schools that are you really high on right now? Notre Dame wasn't one of the ones that were listed. He listed,
and
like
he's talking to he knows he's talking to a Notre Dame guy, right? Exactly.
Right. I mean, he listed like 7 or 8 schools, and they were the usual candidates, right? They were the SEC powers and that type of thing for a Louisiana kid, which makes complete sense. So at this point, James Simon, who is a very good football player, I believe Notre Dame will continue to recruit this young man because he's very, very good. There's intrigue there, But until they are able to get him up to campus, it's a very big long shot at this point. Like, that's where we are.
So, speaking of long shots, Ryan, the next kid that we'll discuss is Waltez Clark from Florida. Goes to, I believe he goes to, doesn't he play for Tampa Plant? I believe is who he plays for.
He does.
So we'll talk about Waltez Clark, one of the taller backs in the class, very long and rangy kid. So obviously this one will be real short, Ryan. It's a kid that Notre Dame has interest in, still very early stages in that regard.
I love his film, man. 6'2", 195 pounds. I'm like, that looks like a young Darren McFadden to me. Like, that kid can go. He's got long strides. I like a lot of what Waltez Clark is, and they've been down to see Waltez Clark in the open period, which is great. But I've had the chance to talk to Waltez, and this is one of those kids where just don't think there's a ton of interest in Notre Dame as of right now. Could that change? It's always possible. Will Notre Dame still talk to him? I'm sure they'll still try. But at this point, I just don't think there's much legitimate interest from that one. Again, another talented kid, state of Florida. Notre Dame's actually having decent stuff so far in the state of Florida in 2025.
A lot of interest. Don't know where it's going to go, but there's a lot of at least early interest in. So we'll see that. It's noteworthy to say that, Ryan, because Notre Dame would be justified if they just wanted to abandon Florida, basically. Like, find a kid here and there, a Justin Thurman type, but otherwise abandon the state. It's been a brutal state for Notre Dame, but they're not. And I kind of like that.
I mean, 2025, you already have a commitment from Davion Dixon, who's out of the Miami area, right? I know he's a Catholic school kid, but still out of Miami. You're in a good spot with Justin Thurman, obviously, going into his visit later this month. Jarquez Carter, who's a really talented defensive tackle in the 2025 class, is also visiting at the end of July, and he likes Notre Dame a ton as well. So going after a guy like Waltez Clark, I'm all for it. I just don't think there's a ton of traction as of right now.
Last guy we're going to talk about, Ryan, is Daniel Anderson from Bryant High School in Arkansas. He's a young man. I love stories like this. Thank you. Because, hey, Rita, because she went to the vet today. So we had a checkup, and she's still cancer-free, and her numbers were good. So we're very happy to have Rita there. So Angela just brought me down a spoon. And, of course, every time Angela opens that door, Rita comes down. She has to get on TV. We talk about Daniel Anderson. Ryan, love stories like this. Kids that say, hey, I don't have an offer. Why is a kid from Arkansas with no offer from Notre Dame going to an evaluation camp? Right? Yes. That's because he's a kid that wants to prove himself. I like kids like that. And so, and then you pop in the film, you're like, oh, this kid's actually a pretty good football player. And since he's been offered by Notre Dame, his recruiting profile has certainly started to take off a little bit. Yes, he was nobody had him evaluated. Rivals recently released their new top 250. They had him at number 160. And so I was props to Rivals for taking a kid they had zero profile on and putting him into the top 200. Talented back, and clearly he's not coming to compete for an offer if he has zero interest in Notre Dame, Ryan.
Well, very true. I mean,
I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I think I can figure that one out.
That usually means something. Yeah, especially Brian. I mean, there was Notre Dame recruited a couple kids in Arkansas in the 2024 class, obviously, and I had heard how much money it costs to fly from Arkansas to South Bend or into Chicago, and I'm like, oh man, I wouldn't do that either. Like, that's insane. So yes, it matters, the fact that he came and camped at Notre Dame, got the offer. And we just reported, obviously, yesterday on the message board, Daniel Anderson will also be making the trip back to Notre Dame July 30th for the barbecue. So obvious interest there. The second time coming back in 30 days or so for Daniel Anderson, which is very notable. And I think that is very telling of the interest there. Talented kid, plays at Bryant High School, which for people that remember TJ Lindsey that they recruited for a while in the 2024 class, he's out of Bryant as well. Bryant has won 5 straight state championships. So that is one of the power programs down in the state of Arkansas. Daniel Anderson obviously has legitimate interest in Notre Dame, camped obviously this offseason, as well as getting back there later this month. So very interested to see what the buzz is on Notre Dame from Daniel after the second trip to Notre Dame, when he gets to see a little bit more of obviously the campus and the student life.
Because that's the thing, though, Ryan, right? Is these kids are coming to campus to earn an offer. That's their focus. Now, they take tours and they do some things, but it's not a visit per se, really. It's not. It's a workout.
It's a
And
business trip, basically.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And it's a smart business trip too, because this shows me that it doesn't shock me that his high school is very successful. You can
Yes.
tell these coaches know what they're doing, because any coach that's smart knows, you want a great way to get exposure for my kid. Here's what you do. Take them to Notre Dame, let them ball out and get an offer from the Irish. Because what that tells, like, every program in the country is, oh, Notre Dame offered this kid. I don't even really have to do the academic background check now. Like, that's done for me. You know what I mean? Like, so now I can jump in on the kid and get going. So that was a smart move. But again, I love kids that that compete, and he
Yes.
certainly did that. He certainly did
Yep.
that.
Him and Justin Thurman, I think, are cut from a little bit of a similar cloth, Brian, and the fact that a lot of the kids we're talking on the list, like Usman Kromah, who has camped and has been at events. So this is like, but Usman Kromah is such a high profile player that he could just sit at home and collect offers when when these schools come in, and they'll be like, "Yep, I want that kid." Right? Justin Thurman, Daniel Anderson, those types of players, they're like, I'm going to go to all these camps because I'm going to earn everything I have, and maybe I'm a little bit underranked to begin with, but obviously he was very productive this past year for Bryant, a part of the state championship. All that school knows is winning, man. I mean, he's never known anything else but winning state championships, which, again, we talk about this for like the Jaden Greathouses of the world, for the Rico Floreses of the world, for those players, for the Cooper Flanagans of the world out of De La Salle, coming from these great programs that all they know is winning. That matters. That really matters to me. And I think Daniel Anderson is just another part of this conversation. And I'm excited for him to get to campus to really see how he meshes with everybody down there.
Ryan, you just nailed it. How do you build a winning culture in your football program? Put an emphasis on recruiting kids that come from winning programs that understand the importance of doing things the right way on and off the field all the time. I mean, it's
Cole
not that you
Mullins,
only
Middle
recruit
Creek.
that, right? You don't
Yeah.
only recruit that, but when you find kids like that, and I think Jaden Greathouse is a great example. When you find kids like that, man, you got to prioritize them, and it's a part of the country Notre Dame is also clearly trying to get into more, right? And you look at kind of Missouri, Arkansas, Oklahoma, that whole region down there, sort of that Bible Belt, so to speak, area in central United States. I was going to say Central America. Nope, not what I meant. Central United States of America. They're starting to try. They're trying to get more into there. They got Oklahoma. They went to Oklahoma, obviously, and offered in 24 class. They offered Xavier Robinson, who has since committed to Oklahoma when Notre Dame passed on him to take Kedron Young. By the way, Notre Dame was going to get a commitment from Xavier Robinson that week if Kedron Young didn't commit beforehand. And we obviously Notre Dame was higher on Kedron Young, but still a very good back, highly productive back from Oklahoma. They went into 25 class, got Nate Roberts out of there. Obviously, they've got several kids from the Missouri area, so clearly an area that Notre Dame is trying to make a greater emphasis in, Ryan. And so Bryant's a place to go. There's no question about it. So I think it's smart because you're going to find athletes there that can be big time athletes. So you don't have to. We talked earlier about Florida. You don't have to always rely on Florida when you can start tapping into some of these other areas as well.
Yep. I mean, it's these because I think that some of these areas that we talk about, this is why Missouri has always been a spot that I've talked about so much, is the fact that the in-state school is not really a power right now, right? Like Missouri's had some down. They've had a couple good years sporadically throughout the recency, but it's been kind of up and down. Arkansas is one of those schools that I actually like. Like, I think that Sam Pittman's still, I like Sam Pittman as a coach. I think that school can get to a good spot. But you look at it and say there's no legitimate power. You should be able to still go in and compete with the Arkansas of the world to get a kid out of the state of Arkansas, for instance. So I really like Daniel Anderson. I really like Brian. I mean, I like dipping into those programs that all they know is winning. And I think that he is a exemplary type of player to have on this board. And I'm seeing the campus once obviously wasn't enough for this young man. Seeing it twice, that's legitimate, and it's something that I'm very excited to hear how it goes at the end of the month.
I would also say, Ryan, that it wouldn't shock me if over the next year we see more kids added to the board, even if they do get a summer commitment for the reasons we discussed, the possibility. And the way you explain it to a kid that commits early is, listen, we don't know what our roster is going to look like in a couple of years, right? I mean, we expect Audric to have a great year and go to the NFL. Devin Ford's going to be gone by the time you get here. If Jeremiah Love is what we hope he is, you two are only going to be on the roster together for a year. You know what I mean? And same with Jadarian Price. I mean, if Jadarian Price is who we hope he is, he's not going to be here by the time you show up. I mean, so it's an easy sell, and it's true. I mean, if these kids are what we think they're going to be, looking at it from the Notre Dame coach's standpoint, then guess what? They're going to be gone by the time the 25 class shows up. When you look at Audric Estime, Jadarian Price, and guys like that, you don't want a running back to be a 4-year guy, because what it means is he's really, really good. Right. That's the reality of it.
I was going to say it's a blessing in disguise to be a guy that has to play with other really talented running backs. Yeah. I mean, one of the great things about Najee Harris coming out of Alabama was Najee was really only the guy for 1 year, right? Like there wasn't a crazy amount of tread on his tires in college anyway. I mean, that's a blessing in disguise. It really is. So other running backs, I think it's really easy to stack great running back after great running back after great running back if you have a good track record, because they should know if they have people around them that are advising properly, you would want them to save their legs a little bit in college, right? Be the guy for 1 year and be really good for the other two in a part of a complementary role. And then you go to the NFL and hopefully you get to that second contract. That's the trajectory I would want.
Also, Ryan, I think it's also important to learn from other talented backs. That's the other part too, is you can always learn things from older players. And so I think it's really smart to do that. So overall, Ryan, I like the 25 running back board. I'm still unsure of just how good the 25 running back class is overall. It's good. Right now, I'm still evaluating the film to kind of find out just how good, just how good of a class is it. But what I do like about it so far is it has good depth from what I can tell so far. Yeah. There is some top-level talent, but there's a lot of diversity of skills. Like there's a lot of different type of backs that people can look for in this class. And I think that's something that matters too. And that's also why you mentioned earlier too, the whole kids could leave, keep going down that list. If I would love for Notre Dame to get into a situation like Alabama's in, Ryan, and that is that you're only getting backs really to be the guy for a year and then they're going pro, because what that means is they're putting up big time numbers and they're becoming high draft picks. That's really where you want to be. That's also why you can never take a year off from recruiting. You can never look and say, well, man, we're pretty set, we're pretty loaded. Well, if you are pretty set and pretty loaded, you better hope that some of those guys pan out, meaning that they're going to leave. Right. And so you always need to make sure you're recruiting. And that's what I like about Notre Dame in the 25 receiver class. They're not resting on their laurels for what they've done the last 2 years. They're not doing that at running back either. Yeah, we did really well the last couple of years. But you know what? This is looking at it from the coach's standpoint. We're going to go out there and we're going to keep balling out. And that's pretty much what they're trying to do.
It's very interesting, kind of the what Dylan McCullough has been able to do too, Brian, because I know we already talked about him a ton, but he's the rare person that is a great fit as both an NFL and college coach, which is just it's unique, isn't it? Like you don't usually find guys that are really good assistant coaches in both. Like usually you're an NFL guy, you're a college football guy. But he is a grinder as a recruiter. He's obviously a great coach, and I'm excited for the future of the running back room and continuing.
He's a pretty genuine guy too. I think that's something that we've talked about. You get that from a lot of the parents. And what I mean genuine is sometimes that even means telling parents and recruits on the recruiting trail things that they may not want to hear. And that's something that had a huge impact on Jeremiah Love, for example, is that he wasn't just telling Jeremiah, you're the greatest thing since sliced bread and you're this and he was very real. Hey, we love you. We want you. We also like this guy. Here's the role. And there was a consistency to it, which we've talked about in the past. And that stuff matters to young people because the kids are connected so much more now, Ryan. You can't lie to one kid because that kid's going to DM another kid that you went and saw, and they're going to end up talking and be like, man, this guy told me the same thing he told you. And I don't mean in a good way. Yes. Meaning like he's telling me about me that I'm the number one back and he loves me. And then he's telling this other guy that he's the number one back and he loves him. And they're like, hold on a second. Like you're lying to somebody. Yeah. And that's not the case with Dylan McCullough. And kids like that. Parents especially like that, man.
I think Jeremiah Love and Jason Love are the perfect, and Jason Love is Jeremiah's father for people that don't know him out there. I think they're the perfect example for this, Brian, is that Jeremiah doesn't want someone to tell him that he's great at everything, right? Like they want to be challenged. That's why he's a different cat. That's why he came to Notre Dame. And Jeremiah Love would not be in Notre Dame, obviously, if Dylan McCullough was not the coach. That's an easy answer. So yes, I think Dylan McCullough is a perfect balance of developer, coach, recruiter, and man. I think that he really has all aspects kind of nailed down, and that's why he's been such a successful recruiter so far.
Ryan,
Yes.
you know what time it is now?
Are we ending the podcast before watching film?
We're going to watch some film.
Okay.
You know that would never happen. You know that would never happen. All right, so let's dive into some film, Ryan. We're going to start off with Justin Thurman, a kid that you and I are both very high on from a potential standpoint, but you'll see this is not a real long highlight tape, but a lot longer than you'd think it would be.
Yes.
But I like the build. I'll tell you, Ryan, that's one of the first things I was surprised by this summer when I saw him was he's a pretty jacked up kid. I mean, he's pretty ripped. He reminds me a lot of frame wise, and I'm curious to hear Brian Smith's opinion on this because Brian has seen both of them in person. I have seen both of them in person, but I did not see Jadarian as a high school kid. He is a kid to me that has a frame that reminds me a great deal of Jadarian Price, meaning the older he gets, he's going to really fill out upper body wise and be a really strong he's already a pretty strong muscular kid now. He's just a little skinnier, strong, kid. And then the second thing you see that stands out to me, Ryan, is just the speed. I mean, this kid's got a lot of speed.
And he gets up the top gear pretty dang fast too, which is great. Like it's if you're a fast kid, you also want the acceleration aspect, and I think that that's what Daniel has. I mean, this is a young man where I think there's decisiveness, I think there's explosiveness, but I also think that there's a one-cut approach here, right?
Yes.
Like this kid wants to get vertical, and I absolutely love that. This is a outside zone heavy kid that I think really patient laterally.
Yeah.
Let's hit it up and
he's not a jump, like make a million people miss in space. No. He's not like a DeAnthony Thomas kind of guy. He can jump cut, as you see there. That's a quick bounce out. He can jump cut backwards, which will make him good on zone, but he wants to put that foot in the ground and get vertical. He runs hard, but he's still young and learning to be more physical. Like he wants to be physical. He's learning how to do it, but he's got a really nice leg drive, which you see in the film. But he shows good patience. I'm very much looking forward to seeing what he does. And here's another thing I like about him. They didn't play him a ton at running back this year. So you know what he did? He went and played some defense for them as well. And you're going to see that here in a little bit on some of them as well. Now, not a guy that I would necessarily look at and say, hey, he's going to be a defensive player. But I saw enough from him to say, push come to shove, it's not out of the realm of possibility. This kid could play defense down the road. And you'll start to see a little bit of that in some of this later film.
This is one of those kids, Brian, whereas if you're a high school coach, you're like, I need to get that speed on the field somehow, right? Like you just need to get it on. And yes, this is the player. I saw someone ask in the chat, Justin Thurman is the young man that we had on the podcast last week, pre-recorded, the running back out of Tampa Jesuit. That is him. I know he was on with Brian Smith also before that. And I mean, this kid's a one cut and go explosive cat. I agree. His body type's a little bit different, but I actually like the one you said a little bit earlier as far as like play style, Brian. Like I could see a little bit of Dexter Williams here as far as one cut, go, explosive.
Like he's not trying to shake a lot of people. He's going to hit that hole and then get to the second level. And then once he does, it's strike up the band. I mean, this isn't because Dexter was a 4.58 kid too. That's the other part. Dexter had a great first step. Dexter had, let me rephrase. Dexter had an elite first step.
Yep.
The problem for Dex was when it comes to the NFL is when your second step is the same as your first step, right? Because there's no second gear for Dex, right? Yeah. Justin has a second gear.
Yes, he does.
And that's what you look for.
Yeah, and I mean, again, you're seeing a lot of special team stuff, which I'd love to see. I mean, how are you going to get this guy
Davis made the Broncos, baby.
Yeah, hey man, if how is this guy going to make the team as a young player or make his impact on the field? Maybe he's a kick returner. Maybe he's covering kicks. I mean, that all matters to selling how you're going to make your impact early on in your college career.
Nice read in coverage there. Really nice read. Look, look how aggressively he steps up into pass pro here a little bit too. I do like that.
And if you miss my interview with him or you miss Brian Smith's interview with him, it should be no shock that this kid's playing special teams, that he's a really good, that he's, stepping up as a pass protector. This kid's one of those grinders, man, a grinder that also runs in the 4.4s. I take that kid every single day.
Right. What I would argue, Brian, what I would say about him, I get why some people don't have him as high on the board as other people, But this kid's going to be, in my opinion, if the ranking evaluations are accurate, I'm not going to be shocked if this kid is a really big riser this season because he's going to play a lot more. I think the running back they had last year's name was Smith. I forget his first name, but he's a pretty good player. But he's gone now. Justin's going to be the guy, I believe, this year, and so you're going to see him really explode. He's going to be a guy that's going to put up a lot of numbers. He still has 2 years of high school eligibility remaining as well.
Yes, he does. I think I said last week on the podcast, Brian, like I wouldn't be shocked if this kid's a top 100 player when all is said and done, as far if he gets the production and he's able to kind of check those boxes. Because again, there are not many kids out there that as high school sophomores can run in the 4.4s legitimately. And Justin Thurman is one of those kids, and that's a pretty rare thing.
So, Ryan, before we move on, I just wanted to let you all know I got a phone call during the show, and I had to tell that person, hey, I'm recording a live show. And he told me he wanted me to tell the live audience hi. And so I think our Ohio State fans are going to like this. My guy, Tony Alford, was actually trying to give me a shout, and he texted me, he said he wanted to tell the live audience that Tony Alford says hi. So that's to all the Ohio State and Notre Dame fans that are in the chat. So one of the best guys in the business. His ears must have been burning, like he's talking about running. We were talking about running back, so I think maybe his ears were burning or something like that. And he's like, man, I don't know, for some reason Driscoll running back. I gotta see what's going on with him. So yeah. So he said hi. Good guy, really good guy. Love Coach Alford. So let's get into this next one, Ryan. And we're going to talk about Usman Kromah, and fans, y'all are going to enjoy this one a lot. There's no doubt about this one, Ryan.
Runaway freight train, baby.
This is a really talented player. You talk about one cut and go, Ryan.
Yes.
This is a one cut and go back. So let's pop up some film of Usman.
I like to phrase this type of running back as a no nonsense runner, Brian. Right? Like he does not care about.
That is a great explanation. It's like I have a track I'm going on, and it's your idea. It's best for you not to get on it. He's a little tight, Ryan, to your point, but for a bigger back, he's got some juice though. Right. I mean, he does. He's not like Xavier Robinson, right? Who I liked a lot on film. Don't get me wrong. But Xavier Robinson was like a big physical punishing back, really nice feet, but just not a guy that was going to hit a ton of home runs based on his speed. This kid, if he gets into the second level, Ryan, he can take it to the house. There's no doubt about it.
Xavier Robinson was a little bit taller, but he reminded me a lot of Samaje P. Ryan that played at Oklahoma. Like I thought they were kind of similar backs. Like not a lot of wiggle, not a ton of juice, but like just really physical and strong. Right?
Nice feet, nice balance. Right.
This kid does have pretty nice footwork, right? Like the footwork's good. I think you'll see it. And I think Brian Smith was one that posted him running around. It's just like he's a little bit tight, right? He's just a little bit tight, but it's fine. It doesn't matter because he's explosive as heck, and he is also incredibly physical. Right. I mean, yes, no nonsense is the best way to put it.
And the reality is too, Ryan, is running back is one of those positions where there are some limitations to being a little tight, but not really. I mean, unless you're a team that's going to have him running a bunch of pass routes. But like right here, he's got plenty of feet to do. Look, he makes two really impressive cuts here, right? You got a jump cut. That's when I say jump cut, that's what I'm referring to. Technically, a jump cut can be forward or backwards. I call it a bounce when it's play side. It's a jump cut when it's backside. But this is a nice jump cut. It's not elite, but it's good. But then he's got that little sting. I mean, again, is he going to blow you away with juke? No, but he can make those kind of cuts, and that's the kind of cuts that a kid his size with his speed and power needs to make. Yeah. And so here's an example of somebody. He doesn't catch the ball a ton, but he catches it clean. That's a big boy coming out on the crossing route with a head of steam, right? And the other thing you see in some of those things to me, Ryan, is you see a kid with a lot of patience as a runner. Very smooth, very patient, and knows how to let blocks develop. And then when he decides to go, he's going to go.
Brian, this is like one of those kids. If I was a high schooler playing against him, because I never played against a kid that was quite like this, right? But I would just be like, there's a business decision that gets made at times when this kid's running, straight head downhill. Like this is just not a fun time. And that's, I really do think that he's got really good footwork, though, like very efficient, able to find creases pretty easily. While he's a no-nonsense kid, he can make subtle moves to be able to really get space, which I think is very important. And I think that what makes him, he's probably the best back that I've seen. I mean, him and Gideon Davidson were both really good, right? But like Kromah's really good football player, man. Really impressive.
Yeah, I like Gideon Davidson too as well. That's a really nice pickup for Clemson. Clemson's got a really nice backfield already in the 25 class with him and Blake Hebert. But yeah, Usman is definitely in that conversation. And the question for me is going to be, so when you look at how big Usman is, the question I'm going to have is how much better is he going to get? I think that's going to determine who the best back in this class ends up being, because Usman's one of those kids where if he doesn't get a lick better, Ryan, he's still a
Very
top
good.
100 back.
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
if he is the same kid in 2 years that he is right now, he's a top 100 back.
Yep.
With Gideon Davidson, it's okay. Well, how much better is he going to get? Well, there's a little bit more room for physical growth there. So with Usman, the question is going to be about, okay, does he have more technical refinement? Does he get a little bit more juice? He's going to get bigger and stronger. But I mean, look how strong he is already. Imagine what he's going to be like as a senior. Think about that. This is sophomore film, folks. This is sophomore film.
And he's a legitimate 210 plus right now. Like this kid's
Yeah.
going to be 225, probably 230 when it's all
Yeah.
said and done. Like his body type reminds me of, like, you remember Fred Taylor that obviously played at Florida and with the Jacksonville Jaguars.
Oh, yeah.
Like I see that body type with Usman.
Yep. Talented player, Ryan. Very
Yes.
talented player. So a guy that Notre Dame fans should get to know a little bit. So should a lot of SEC fans, because this kid's gonna be a really good player for somebody.
Yep.
And again, is he a guy you're going to be having run doing this a lot? No, but the fact that he can do it, as I said, he doesn't catch the ball a ton in high school, but when he does, he catches it really clean. They got that kid running quick out cuts, speed out cuts, although I wouldn't necessarily call his out cut a speed out. Yeah.
It's a power out cut. So yeah. I mean, and I like the Aldrich Estime comparison to a degree, Brian, because I know they're a little bit different, but like the style is very similar. Because Aldrich Estime also catches the ball pretty well. Again, he's not going to be like a high volume, like crazy
running
catch
corner routes. Yeah, right. Exactly. But Aldrich can catch the ball. And when I talk about comparison, Ryan, there's some differences in their skill set.
Yeah.
But what I'm more referring to is how you use them.
The role.
Yes. It's like the same offense. You're going to pop them into the same offense, and that's the thing that I like about it. So, talented player. Speaking of talented players, Ryan, let's dive into Daniel Anderson's film. This is a kid that, partly because he plays on such a dominant high school, split carries with other backs. Sure. It's a kid that I'm gonna pull the film up just on his stats for the year, because it's just kind of funny when you look at it. Like, less than 1 every 7 touches goes for a touchdown.
I was going to say this is one of my favorite stat lines. I've seen in 2025
so kid has 74 carries, 11 touchdowns. So less than, basically 1 every 6 point something carries goes for a touchdown for this kid, which is I'd say pretty good, Ryan. Right?
That would be a really good number if it was receptions.
Right?
Points.
Exactly.
Yes.
Also, a kid that averaged 11.6 yards per attempt last year, which again plays for a very good team. But as you'll see, kid's a good football player, Ryan. Yes. And kid that has he has probably the most typical running back build, I think, that's on the board. Just, like he's got the right height, he's got the right body. He just looks like a running back. Like, you just look at this kid and you're like, yep, that's a running back. Like, if he was just standing on the field before the game, not doing anything, you look at that kid and say, that kid's probably a running back. Right.
Yeah, I think he measured at like 5'11", 193 pounds or something like that. So like, yeah, he's a pretty densely built kid for his age. I mean, this kid's going to be 205 probably by the time he's a senior in high school. Like, he's just a very sturdy, physical runner. But I think they try to get him out into the perimeter a ton, Brian. I think he's got a pretty good first step. Again, I don't know if it's dynamite long speed, but like, he gets to his top gear quickly, which is important. It's very important.
And this is Daniel Anderson from Bryant High School in Arkansas, for those who I don't know if we had said that before, Ryan, but that's the thing that I think right now holds him back a little bit from a recruiting standpoint, from a ranking standpoint, is he doesn't have a lot of juice. And he doesn't have that big size to overcome not having a lot of juice. But one thing that I was told this summer is he actually tested a little bit better maybe than some people thought. So again, sophomore film, we've seen kids develop a lot of speed over their last 2 years. What I like about this kid, Ryan, is, again, running back build, running back game. Look at that. I mean, that's a nice cut. He takes that all the way back. This is a good read. This is an outside counter play that he just kind of feels that backside cut and makes an. I mean, this is actually good defense. I mean, this run support player comes literally untouched, and he just says, no, I'm going to go the other way. I'm going to cut this backside and take this one out the and then get vertical, right? Cuts it back.
That's tremendous. Tremendous vision, man. I think that's one of the biggest things that stands out. And he's a physical kid, man. Like he's not afraid to run inside. They also get him on the outside with some tosses, with some outside zone. I mean, he is probably one of the most fundamentally sound running backs on the board right now, as
Mhm.
far as the things that really matter to playing the running back position, the understanding of spacing, vision, those things that all really matter to playing a role relatively early. Again, like there's some guys that are definitely higher upside players than what Daniel
Yep.
Anderson is, in my opinion. But I know that Daniel Anderson, the minute that he comes to campus, like he'll know how to play the running back
Right.
position, which is
You
very important.
you use the word fundamentally sound, Ryan. The way I like to describe it, and in fundamentally sound for me, what it means to me is it means a guy that's efficient. What you don't want is running backs who need extra steps to get somewhere because they don't have that good technique. And this run right here is a perfect example. He's running a counter play, and it's basically 4 steps, and he's past the line of scrimmage. Right? I mean, that's a very efficient downhill kid that's going to maximize the speed that he has. And in that regard, is where he's a little bit like Dexter Williams, right? Is in when Dex finally did learn proper technique, he became a better running back and became a more effective running back. But that I'm not saying he's like Dex, but in that regard,
Yeah.
where that getting through that hole quickly, even though you may not be a burner, that's something that you want to see. And this is a good back. This kid's going to have a much better offer list when it's all said and done than he has right now, and it's pretty good right now,
Yep.
in my
And
opinion. I
again,
get that ball in the outside arm. I don't like that.
sophomore film, though.
Yep.
Sophomore film.
Yep.
Yep.
Absolutely. Right, but again, you see on that play there too, Ryan. This is a great high school run. This isn't a big run in college. He's getting tackled right there.
Oh, what was that defensive
Right.
tackle doing, man?
And that lack of juice is one of the things that just like is going to keep him below some other players, but it's also still something that I'm keeping an eye on this kid because if he gets it all faster the next 2 years, he's really going to take a jump.
Yep.
And he does a lot of this traditional running back stuff too, Ryan, in the pass game.
Yeah.
Look at
He's
that
used
leg
well.
drive.
He's
Oh
used
my
well in the
goodness.
screen game a ton. And I mean,
Yeah.
he had 9 catches for 246 yards, Ryan. So, healthy
Yeah, the kid had
27
80
yards a
the kid had
catch.
83 touches and 14 touchdowns,
It's
Ryan.
nuts, man. It's
Yeah.
absolutely nuts. Yeah.
Yeah, he's a talented kid. Talented kid. And nice
Sure
leg
is.
drive, really nice dip and rip. I like that too. Just a very natural runner. There's
Yep.
just a lot of things to like about this young man. And expect I'm curious to see kind of what Notre Dame can do with him, to be honest with you. I'm not quite sure. I mean, obviously there's an interest level there. How
Yep.
much of one we'll find out. But he's a good back. He's a really good back. Here's another good back, Ryan, that we're going to take a look at, and we're going to go and dive into James Simon next. This is an interesting kid to me, Ryan, because he's another kid that I think is a great running back from a feel for the game, skill set
Yes.
standpoint, but also a guy that doesn't also not necessarily a big juice guy at
Yep.
this point in time. But man, talk about a great feel for the game
Yeah.
and
I mean,
great
that's
vision.
when I
Great
said
vision.
Daniel Anderson is one of the most technically sound runners on the list, it was because James Simon's always also on the list, right? Because
Yes.
I think that this kid feels there's some guys that understand spacing and where guys are supposed to be on the field when they're running the ball, and there's other guys that feel it. And I
This
think
is
that
one
this
of the
kid
most
feels
impressive
it.
runs you'll ever see, Ryan, and he makes it look really easy.
Yeah. And the
Like,
and the really good ones make the hard things look really easy, man.
and
And
here's what I'm talking about. There's constantly like 5, 6 kids around him constantly on this run, and he never gets touched.
yep.
Like, he barely gets touched that once. Like, how does that happen when there's just a 5, 6 guys around him the entire time? That he made that look really easy, and it's not. That's
sorting
not an
through
easy run.
sorting through traffic, man. Some guys have a feel for it, some guys do not. This kid, I think, really has. We can coin it as vision, we can coin it as awareness, at feel, whatever. He has a very great understanding
Mhm.
of where everyone is at on the field at all times. Like this is one of those space kids, and while he might not have the greatest juice of all time, there might be guys that are more physically impressive than him. He is going to be one of the more productive running backs because he just understands
Yeah.
how the feel of the game, man. It's just really impressive stuff.
Very underrated back too, Ryan, I would
Yep.
argue. Look, again, so no Notre Dame bias for us. We have zero little we do not think Notre Dame is going to be a player for him right now. He talked to him, but they're not going to be right now. We don't see it. So we'll still say kid's very underrated. The highest he's ranked is by On3 has him at number 124. 247 has him number 195, ESPN 212, and then Rivals doesn't have their top 250. This is a top 100 running back for me. And if he had more speed, he would be a top 100 running back. But I've said before, I don't care as much. That's a great cut right there. I don't care as much about speed at running back. I really don't. And the NFL is loaded with running backs who are really good that aren't burners. And college football especially is filled with guys like that. So when I look at this kid, I mean, this is a really talented back, Ryan. Very athletic, great feet. He has, of the kids we've talked about today, he has the best feet that we've shown so far.
Yeah,
I think Waltez Clark might be in that conversation as well.
That is dumb. That was dumb. That was stupid.
But of the guys we've watched so far, he has the best feet. I mean, again, not a lot of burst right now, but again, he's young. But that is a really impressive cut right there. I don't know what the heck they're teaching there technique-wise. But, I mean, it is what it is. But, man, he that's like a weird draw technique or something. I don't know what the heck that is because it's not counter.
It's almost like he's doing a flare, but like they do like that flare where like they try to get him downhill more than it like lateral.
It's like the weirdest draw technique ever, but it's working for him. But this setup right here, like to know how to get string this guy out, bam, because here's what he does, Ryan. He pushes outside right here. He's pushing outside. See that? He sees the angle of the safety coming downhill. So he knows this guy's playing here. So as soon as he comes to balance, he sticks him outside, gets the kid to lean, and then breaks inside. Like, this is great feel for the game. And then vertical, immediately gets vertical.
Really I know a cliche that we hear all the time is making someone miss in a phone booth. This kid makes people miss in phone booths. Like very small amount of space is what James Simon needs in order to make people look stupid in space.
Yeah, I really like this kid a lot. Yeah, I really like this kid a lot. I really do.
Man, these defenders' ankles are probably need to be iced after some of
these. He's a Louisiana kid. I would imagine LSU's gonna have a shot here. I mean, what he is to me, Ryan, is a more athletic version of Logan Diggs.
It's interesting.
Like, that's what he is. Like, as far as running style, a little different body type. Logan is thicker. I mean, Logan's been over 190 for a while.
Yeah.
But as far as that, just maybe not fast, but really smooth. I'm talking about what Logan was in high school. That's what this kid does. Because I actually, Notre Dame didn't actually, in my opinion, use Logan in all the ways that I feel he should have been used. In the UNLV game, they did a little bit where they had him, remember, run a couple toss plays and things like that. Like, I don't think Notre Dame maximized Logan Diggs' ability last year because of the offense that they ran. They used him as a downhill power back. Logan is actually a shifty guy. I mean, he's got really nice feet and can do some things like that. Notre Dame just never gave him a chance to do it. That's how James Simon is. And so I think that system at LSU with what Mike Denbrock likes to do running the football is actually a really good fit for what he would do. But I also think he'd be a really good fit for what I think Notre Dame is going to be doing forward, which is doing more stuff inside out type of runs. But this kid is a really natural back. This is a top 100 back for me.
I think so. Yeah. Well, and one cool thing is that James Simon's 6 foot, 195 pounds right now. If this kid gets up to 205, 210 and is able to really improve his power profile and maintain that quickness, then we're talking about like almost unstoppable as far as an inside runner. Like, he's going to make guys look stupid in his small spaces, and he's going to be able to be physically imposing and break some tackles with lower leg drive. Right. I mean, that's the full arsenal as far as the inside running ability.
And I think when he gets to college, you're going to see a program use him a lot more in the pass game than he does in high school. He'll catch the ball a little bit in high school, but not nearly as much as I think I would use him anyway. Like, getting a kid like that on swing routes and outside checkdowns. Like, if I was having him do checkdowns, I would have him mix up little just normal stops, just little spot checks, right? I would have him do arrow routes, but I would also use this kid on swings and slide checkdowns as well, Ryan, and to where if I'm getting in the ball, I'm getting him in perimeter and letting him square people up. Because if this kid can square you up, he can hurt you. Because to your point, Ryan, he's shifty, can make you miss. He understands playing with angles, which is a lost art with a lot of young running backs. It's just about being fast and athletic. But the other part too is if you kind of get on your heels a little bit, waiting on that juke, he can put his shoulder down and just run you over. And he's got that too. It's just a really good back. If he was faster, I think that he'd be ranked a lot higher. I think that's I mean, you're watching this film. The only thing he's missing is juice. And I think that's where a lot of people miss the boat on running back evaluations is they still obsess over speed. when the reality is I'm not saying speed is bad. Go look at Jahmyr Gibbs. Go look at Bijan Robinson. But there's a lot of big-time backs that aren't burners. And I just don't think it's as important when we're talking about college running backs as it is others. But here's the thing, Ryan. This is sophomore film. He's going to get stronger and more explosive and get a little faster.
No,
is he going to be a 4.2 guy when it's all said and done? No. It doesn't need to be. Just get that normal sophomore to senior year growth and explosiveness and speed. This kid's going to have a chance to be a really special back. He's one of my 5 favorite running backs in this class, regardless of like who Notre Dame is looking at. He's in that conversation for me for a top 5 back in this class of what I've seen so far. Again, there's some other backs I haven't seen, but of what I've seen so far, he's a top 5 back to me.
Yep. And I really think that this is a young man too, that if your offensive line isn't playing well on a given Saturday, he's going to make them look a lot better too. Because he's going to make that first man miss all the time, which just matters so much. I mean, how many times in this film have we seen a defender have a free run into the backfield and he just makes him look stupid? And that's just what he does.
Yep. He's a really impressive kid. We'll just watch this last play. Yeah, he's a good one. He's a good one. I don't understand how he's not a top 100 player. I just don't understand how he's not a top 100 player, Ryan. It just doesn't make any sense to me.
That last play was so disrespectful too, because he could have easily just coasted into the end zone, but he wanted to make the last guy miss again just to cap it off. It's like, all right, man.
All it's like, I'm just going to I was going to say one more play, but then I just can't stop this kid's film. It's just he's too good. So I do wish Notre Dame had a better shot with him because this kid is really special.
Yes.
But yeah, he's good. He's a good football player. He's a good football player from Louisiana, state of Louisiana.
Yep.
So Ryan, we're gonna watch one more back here before we get into our interview with Rowan Byrne, and then we'll have a little conversation about Rowan Byrne, and we'll get to a mailbag. So we will have a mailbag today because there's 2 of us, and so let's now this kid's. We are not going to watch all of this kid's film. This kid has a 19-minute highlight film, by the way, so we will not be watching all of
which means he's probably good. Which means
yes. Well, and he also, if I remember correctly, I think there's like a lot of like in some of these, I could be wrong, but I thought that this wasn't one of them. So there's another kid had a really long highlight film, and it was because he put it was intercut, like white tight intercut.
Yep.
There was one kid we watched in last year's class who had a 3-angle intercut, which didn't make any sense to me. But let's watch Waltez Clark, Ryan. This kid is a really, really athletic football player. You're all going to have some fun watching this one.
Yep, he's the tallest of the group, 6'2", listed, 195 pounds. Looks a legit 6'1" to me on film. Yeah. I mean, the stride length is just absurd, man. Like I mentioned Darren McFadden earlier when we talked about him a little bit. Like I see Darren McFadden here. Like his kid is deceptively fast because he strides it out, man. Yeah. Like, he's going to be 220 pounds easy before too long. Like this is that type of kid.
Yep. And he's smoother than like when I first saw his listed height and weight, it was like 6'2", 190, something like that. I thought, I wonder if this kid's going to give me some Josh Adams vibes. And he doesn't, because he's a lot smoother athletically than Josh was. Speaking of tight-hipped guys, Josh was a little tight-hipped, right? But again, didn't hurt him in college. This kid is more fluid than Josh was, in my opinion. A little bit more smooth than Josh was. But when you talk about a longer back with home run speed, I mean, Josh Adams ran a 4.48, despite the fact he was coming off of a broken foot. I mean, people forget that when he ran his – if Josh Adams would have been healthy during the testing season, he runs a lower than a 4.48, in my opinion. But this kid has that kind of juice. Like big time. This kid's a home run. Like this is a kid's a home run waiting to happen every time he touches the football. There's no. This is a jump cut artist. Is the type of back this is because of the tallness, right? The height I think is one of the things where height at a running back position can actually be a negative. Height can be a positive though in certain instances because he's a little bit leggy, which isn't a bad thing because the jump cuts make it. Being a leggy back, the jump cut becomes more lethal, in my opinion, because he can cover more ground and the ability to explode. And he does all these things very naturally. Again, Darren McFadden's the guy that I keep kind of coming back to because I just see the ability he has from an explosiveness perspective. But then you see the one-cut approach. You see that he can just put his foot in the ground, and then he's got home run sprinter speed. I mean, that's just kind of where you are with it. When I first watched his film, I had to check and make sure it wasn't sped up. Because there was a kid that we watched the other day. I forget who it was. There was a skilled kid that I watched the other day who was very obvious his film was sped up. That or he had the fastest referees in high school football.
The worst one I've ever seen of a sped up kid was, remember Lake Seastrunk that played at Baylor? His highlight tape was really good in high school, but it was clearly sped up, man. Like clearly.
When the referee's feet are moving like this, it's a little sped up. So I had to go. I was like, nope, it's not sped up. This kid is like, look at that. See, here's the thing. We see most 6'2" kids have that second gear, that long stride once they get into space. But what's different about this kid, and this is why I don't think Josh Adams is a good comp, because Josh was a guy that needed a few steps to get that speed up. This kid is fast the minute he gets the handoff, Ryan. There's no moment of acceleration. He's just kind of, I'm going, and get the ball in the outside arm, son. But yeah, he's got a very smooth, and Ryan, he's playing in Tampa. He's not playing in some little podunk 1A, small town where he's just, destroying people. This kid's in Tampa.
He's playing against decent competition. Yeah.
Yes.
I say decent very sarcastically. He's playing good competition. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Oh, like a little jump cut there, man.
Right.
Like, yeah.
I'm actually going to look up their schedule from last year, Ryan.
Plant plays a lot of great schools, obviously.
For context purposes, they played Berkeley Prep, home of Keon Keeley.
And
they played Tampa Bay Tech. They played, Alonzo. They played Eastlake in the playoffs, got beat. They play Jefferson. They played Tampa Jefferson last year. So they play quality competition. There's no doubt about it. And this kid's just putting up insane numbers, just really ridiculous production. He really is.
I'm very interested to see how his body develops too, Brian. Like, is this kid going to be a 6'1", 6'1.5", 210-pound back? Is he going to get up to 220, 225? I mean, it's very interesting to see how his body develops as well.
Yeah. And we talked about some of these other kids. They don't use them as much in the pass game. This kid gets used a lot in the pass game. He caught 27 passes last year for 512 yards. I could see some coach, honestly, saying, hey, we want to make you a receiver because of his frame. I wouldn't. I wouldn't. But, I mean, that's where kind of he's got a little bit of Jeremiah Love to him, right? If you want to look for Notre Dame related comps, he's a little thicker than Jeremiah was at the same age. That's the thing. And I would say he's faster than Jeremiah was at the same age as well. But just that guy that you could line him up outside and you could literally go 2 whole series in 21 or 20 personnel and go empty and throw the football if you wanted to with this kid in the game.
And you do it with Jeremiah too, to your point. Yep. I agree.
Yep. Nice leg drive. Not like a punishing runner, but a strong runner. Meaning, like, you're not going to bring him down with side tackles and jersey grabs and stuff like that. You're going to have to hit him with some force if you're going to bring him down. It's a really good football player.
No, he really is, man. I mean,
also not a kid. Here's nothing. Right? Not in the top 100. 0 people have him in their top 100. Nobody.
He's one of the probably top 2 or 3 backs I've seen so far in this class.
ESPN doesn't even have him ranked yet. I don't understand it. Rivals doesn't. ESPN has him number 171. 247 Sports has him at number 119, and On3 has him at number 154. They have him as number 16 running back in the country. I just look at it and say, I don't know that. I don't see how there's 16 or 15 running backs better than this kid, in my opinion. I just
D-Troll Hunter with the greatest comment of the day. Only 16 minutes more to go.
Exactly. We're not going to watch all of it, but you guys see it. Very, very smooth runner. Really good vision. Really good feel for the game. Will stay on his track until you make him get off of it. That's something else too that him and James Simon are very good at. Usman is good at. I think Justin Thurman is good at. I think those kids, all these kids really are really good at, for the most part, at saying, hey, I'm going to stay on my track till the read or the defender makes me get off of it. Yep. And I like kids like that. So not a kid we anticipate Notre Dame really having a great shot at right now, but he is talking to them and receptive. They like him, and so we're going to talk about him. But he's a really talented player.
Very easy to see why they like him so much. And Brandon Plesner, I know, is a big fan of him.
Yeah.
And Brandon, trust me, I am too. But we're talking about realistic options. Conversation turns a little bit.
I think the thing too, the only thing I would say to like Brandon and some of the others is that part of this is about opportunity, right? And to me, if Justin Thurman's a kid that had the same amount of opportunity as as some of these other kids, we'd be having a different conversation about him as well. That's my only kind of pushback a little bit, Ryan, is not that I don't think James Simon is excellent. I think he's excellent. I mean, we're sitting here talking about two kids that are not going to go to Notre Dame,
Right.
most likely, that we are saying these kids are underrated. These kids should be in the top 100, right? And that's the whole point, is like the opportunity wasn't there. And if the opportunity was there, you know, he would put up a lot more numbers, a lot better production, in my opinion. So, because I think there was 3 backs last year that Tampa Jesuit used last season at different times. So that's my only thing, is I feel like it's an opportunity thing for me.
Yep.
This year he's going to get that opportunity. You know, I mean, they had a kid, Joquez Smith. I was right. It was Smith. Joquez Smith's a kid that Ryan rushed for over 1,200 yards in each of his last 3 seasons and had at least 18 touchdowns each of the last 3 seasons.
Yeah.
So you're talking about Justin's that's what Justin sat behind. There's no shame in that, right? There's no shame in that at all. There's 2 running backs that they have this year. I'm not sure if the other kid's still there. They have another kid on the team named Ian Wilson, who's a pretty good back. That was an absolutely loaded backfield last season. Absolutely loaded backfield. I do expect Justin to get a much bigger chunk of the carries this year, even if Ian Wilson is still there. I think we'll see him get a really good chunk of the carries this season because he's a bigger back. But again, what we're going to see this year with Justin Thurman, in my opinion, Ryan, is we're going to see a kid that you're going to see exactly what we're talking about. Is he's not going to need the volume that the other kid does, right? Yep. And that's what I like to see from him. He played against Largo last year, 2 carries for 69 yards and a touchdown. Right? I mean, you're going to see stuff like that from him.
Yep.
And that's what I like to see.
Oh yeah, he's going to have his 7 carries for 115 yards.
He's going to have games like that.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
And he's definitely going to have games like that. But yeah, I think you're seeing there's some good running backs out there. There's definitely some good running backs out there. Good year for Notre Dame to be back at it, and because you loaded up so quickly, you can continue scouring the board for top players. So that is the film breakdown of the running backs, the top running backs on the board for Notre Dame in the 25 class. So, Mr. Roberts, next we are going to actually have an interview that you did with Rowan Byrne. We're going to listen to your conversation with him. I remember listening to it. I'm like, yep, this kid's an offensive lineman. There is no doubt about that. This will be about 20 minutes long. We'll come back, just give a quick update on Rowan Byrne, and then jump into the mailbag. So we're just going to get right to it. When you guys listen to this, just give me a quick thumbs up in the chat or a verbal yes, not verbal yes, a written yes that you guys can hear Rowan when we get it rocking and rolling.
Now joining the Irish Breakdown podcast. It's my favorite time of the year. We all give you a little bit of some insight to some of the top recruits on the board for Notre Dame football. We're flash forwarding to the 2025 class because Notre Dame's almost already wrapped up with the 2024 group. So I want to talk about one of the more talented offensive linemen that are on the board for Notre Dame Fighting Irish. A young man that's not too far away from me. I'm right here in New Jersey. So I got Mr. Rowan Byrne, who's up in Iona Prep School up in the state of New York, was camping at Notre Dame just a few weeks ago. Offered by the staff after seeing him in person, got to work with Coach Rudolph firsthand. Rowan, first and foremost, man, before we get into the nitty and gritty of the recruiting process and everything that's been going on with you, man, I appreciate you for joining the show, and I hope everything's been going good for you, man.
Yeah, no, it's been great.
That's awesome, man. Well, let's start here, Rowan. I know, again, I mentioned camped at Notre Dame a few weeks ago, got that offer, obviously. Take me through just, I guess, that initial visit there, being able to work out with the staff and then being able to leave that visit, that camp, with an offer from the University of Notre Dame.
So I mean, I've been building a relationship with them for a long time because I came to camp last year, 2022. I did basically the same exact thing I did this time because Coach Golden, I'd been in contact with him since last May, and he invited me out, told me to come up the day before everything, see everything, get to meet with everyone, and work out at camp. At the time, I was too young. Notre Dame, just the way that they work with offensive linemen, they aren't going to offer younger linemen. They want to see your sophomore film at least. So Coach Heastan, I've been building a relationship with him, Coach Watt, Coach Golden. But then, of course, Coach Heastan retired. And I guess I was pretty far along in the process at that point. But he'd already seen me work out and see my film. But then he retired, so that kind of restarted everything. But Coach Rudolph got there right before spring practice, and I talked to him a little bit. Then he came out to see me. Coach Golden came out to see me a couple times. He came out to see me in person, work out at my school, and he just thought, he liked my film. He liked how I looked in person. He liked me. He thought that the next step was just getting on campus. So I figured some positive stuff was going to go down, but then it was just really just going to come down to working out and, meeting with the whole staff, while I was out there.
Well, and I know that was a special moment for you, Rowan. If you don't mind me asking, I know we've talked about this in a couple of recap articles in the past and whatnot, but what did that offer from the University of Notre Dame, like, what did that symbolize to you? Like, what was that moment like, being able to officially say you hold an offer from the school?
Yeah, no, that's big for me because I grew up a Notre Dame fan. There's a lot of Notre Dame fans around here. It just kind of happens. It's one of those teams,
Yep.
Massive fan base. It just happens. So for me to be able to get an offer from a team that you grew up being a huge fan of, I mean, that is a dream come true, So that's a really big deal for me, obviously, because that's something I've been working towards really since I started getting recruited, a year and a half ago.
So a lot of Notre Dame fans know obviously a lot about Harry Hiestand. He did a lot of incredible things at the University of Notre Dame. We're still getting to know Coach Rudolph, who has only been on the job, obviously, for a few months now. He has a great resume, obviously, but as a person who has worked under him a little bit at a camp and been able to grow a relationship with him over the last few months, can you just give us a little insight into what type of person Coach Rudolph is, what type of coach he is for you?
Yeah, no, I mean, he's definitely a newer school coach. Now I think some people think of that and think a soft, less intense coach, but I don't really think that's the right way to look at it. It's just a different level of coaching, more personal. He cares more about his players than I think maybe an older coach, which is really important to me. So I know he cares about his guys, and, he expects a lot, of course, but if you're going to give your effort, you're going to, reach expectations, you're going to have a good, strong relationship with him, and it's going to be a place you're going to want to be. He's a guy that you're going to want to be coached by. You're going to want to work hard for him, which is really important. He's not just going to be, screaming his head off the whole time, cursing out his players. He's going to be more positive than that. Obviously still intense, but just a little more positive, which is a good thing to see. Then as a person, I mean, he's a great guy. You just see it just spending time. I got to spend 2 days with him, of course. I mean, he's just a good guy, cares about his family, of course, just like has all the stuff that you look for. You can tell that he has things that he values, I think, fall in line with me. That you can tell he's just a good person. Like when you spend time with someone, you can get a good feel of their values, what's important to them, how are they going to act when you're kind of with them. And from what I've learned about him being with him, I can see that, he's definitely someone he'd want to play for. He would care about you a lot as a player. Like he's someone, if you were a parent, you'd feel comfortable with him being the coach of your kid,
Well, and I'm not totally surprised that you have been developing a relationship with Coach Golden. I know some people would find that weird because they would say, he's a defensive coordinator, obviously, at Notre Dame. But for people that don't know, I mean, Coach Golden has Pennsylvania roots. He obviously coached Temple. I mean, I'm a New Jersey guy, and I have a deep history of just knowing of Al Golden, obviously. So I'm not surprised that he's sticking in that northeast type of area. You know what I mean?
He's from down in he's from Tom's River, right? Something like that. I think kind of South Jersey-ish.
Yeah.
I think, is he the Northeast recruiter? I think so, right?
I think so, yeah, because he kind of has he has his thumbprint on that area.
Yeah, I know he's big out here.
His past.
Yeah, no, I mean he's done a really good job recruiting this area. I think he's basically every guy around here that could play for Notre Dame, he's found them. I think he's done a great job of that.
Well, and I'm curious because everybody knows Al Golden, obviously, not only just from the defense coordinator at Notre Dame, but I mentioned, he was a great coach at Temple. He spent some time down in Miami. Of course, he was in the NFL for a little bit with the Cincinnati Bengals as a linebacker coach when they went to the Super Bowl a couple years ago. Can you describe Coach Golden as a person a little bit? I guess similarly to how you did with Coach Rudolph.
Yeah, I mean, obviously I wasn't coached by him. He's a linebackers coach, but he's very personable. I think he's built a really good relationship with me and my family. Every time I've spent 4 days on campus. When I've been there, he's taken great care of me and my family who has ever been out there. He's built a good relationship with us. Because he's not my position coach. There's not too much he can do besides just making you feel welcome. Right. Making you feel a part of the family and just building a good relationship with you, which is he's done a great job of. So, that's the stuff that matters because, your position coach is obviously most important, but the other coaches on the staff, the best recruiting they can do for a guy who's not at their position is just making them feel at home, making them feel like, if I come here, I know everyone on the staff wants me to be here. I'd be a part of this family. And he's made that clear.
Well, and I know that you said that you had already camped at Notre Dame before, so this wasn't your first time being in South Bend, but just kind of take me through, Rowan, like when you're on campus at Notre Dame, like just kind of what's the vibes? What kind of is the emotions? Like just describe, I guess, a little bit of the campus for me.
I mean, it's the nicest campus in the country. I don't really think, I think everyone who's been there, I'm sure you've been there a bunch of times, I'm sure.
Yes,
what's
sir.
What's your relationship with Notre Dame? How are you connected to it?
It's a great question. So obviously I cover it now. I did not go to the University of Notre Dame, but I have been a Notre Dame fan. I can't remember when I wasn't a Notre Dame fan.
Yeah.
I had a choice of what NFL team I rooted for. I did not have a choice. I grew at the minute I was born, I was a Notre Dame fan. So lifelong fan, man. Lifelong fan.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm sure you've been to games and stuff, seen campus. It's the best campus in the country by far. I think
Agreed.
it's my favorite campus that I've been on. I think it's nice that it's smaller because it's really easy to get around, which is good.
Yep.
And it's beautiful. Like, it's a place you want to be. It's picturesque, really. So I think that would be like, if you were there for 4 years, 5 years, that is a place you'd want to spend your time, because you're not going to be there like, this place sucks. You're going to be there, this is a beautiful place. I enjoy being here. Obviously, being on campus, it's one of the most prestigious universities in the world. You're going to get a great degree coming out of there, which is a big thing to me. So my feel on campus, I think it's a place I'd fit in perfectly. I mean, that's really my feel of it, having been there, a good amount of times.
So you are being recruited, and it's kind of more of a large scope recruiting question. You have offers from Wisconsin already, Stanford, Penn State, Pittsburgh, Minnesota, Michigan, Maryland, Florida, Duke, Boston College, long list of suitors there. And Rowan, a lot of great offensive line producers in there as well.
Yeah.
I mentioned Boston College, I mentioned Michigan, I mentioned Wisconsin. A lot of schools that do an incredible job of developing your position. What has it been like, just, I guess, full scope of recruiting so far and being able to hear from so many great schools already?
Yeah. I mean, I think, it's definitely an honor. I've worked really hard to get to that point, and I'm excited to be here. And definitely it's nice to be recruited by those schools that have a long history of offensive line tradition, because you'll see when you go to a school, like Notre Dame, like Wisconsin, like Boston College, like Michigan, every year they have good linemen. I mean, even Boston College has struggled the last couple of seasons, but still they've put linemen into the NFL. They're probably going to have 2 or 3 guys go to the NFL after this season. When you go to those schools, being an offensive lineman recruited by them, you see there's a total difference. Versus when you go to a school that doesn't have a strong tradition, the lineman there is just, it isn't always something you necessarily want to be a part of. It kind of just seems like they're working super hard, but the culture and tradition of it is not great. But when you go to those schools, the O-line U's, Notre Dame, Wisconsin, Michigan, it's definitely a different level. I think they're treated better. I think you get more respect, and it's a place you want to be. Like if you're going to work your ass off, that's a place you want to be as an offensive lineman.
Sure.
I think there's just a different feeling to it that you get from those 3 schools, just based off everything they've done with their O-linemen.
My favorite part about your game is that obviously 6'6", 290, you fit the offensive tackle build, you have good feet, but you're also a mauler, man. Like, you are just I honestly, someone sent me your film, and the first time I was like, oh, that's a really impressive seeing your film. And I was like, that was a sophomore? That's insane, man. Like, absolutely insane. But I love your film because I could see you fitting at offensive tackle. I could see you kicking inside and being just a butt kicker at guard on the next level if you needed to. What have schools been talking to you positionally? Like, where does Notre Dame see you? Where do some other schools see you from a positional perspective?
Yeah, so that's a really nice thing for me, is because I can kind of fit in anywhere. Because I think, a lot of people look at it as guards and interior guys aren't as athletic, or they're just, they're like a fatter, shorter, just worse offensive tackle. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think Coach Rudolph did a really good job of explaining it. He thinks I'm more of an interior guy, but it's not a height or athleticism thing. He actually thought he likes his offensive linemen, his interior guys, to be the most athletic guys, because he likes to pull them as much as he can, get them out in space so he can get a really dynamic offense going. That's what he was telling me. He thinks I'm, Tyler Biadasz on the Cowboys now.
Yes. Yep.
He coached him at Wisconsin, obviously, for the whole time he was there. And he says I remind him of him. He played center there, and he was like, he showed me his film, a breakdown of it, and he was just pulling him all the time, getting him out into space so he could make things happen. So he thinks I fit in more there just because I have a bigger frame, and I can work on the run game inside against defensive tackles. And he thinks I bring a good athleticism element to it, with having the athleticism to play tackle, but also the demeanor and physicality to play guard. He thinks that's a great combination, because you can obviously, work on the inside run, against defensive tackles, nose tackles, of course. Then you can pull, get out into space and make things happen, which he thinks is a great combination. He thinks I fit in really well there,
Yeah, no, I agree with that, because I think that the biggest misnomer because I think back to the Wisconsin years under Coach Rudolph, and still now even to a degree, everybody just thinks inside run, inside run. I'm like, no, man, they're running a lot of pin and pull. They're running some jet sweep stuff. They're running, buck sweep. Like they're getting guys on the rim every time.
Even he was showing me on the film, he was running outside zone, and he having Piatas, he's pulling outside. He's like, there's no one covering him. We're running zone, but I don't care. I'm going to pull him outside. He's athletic enough to do it. We're going to get out into space, and we're going to make it even more dynamic of a play, which is a really good thing to see. He's working towards guys' strengths. He wants athletic interior guys.
Absolutely. And especially in today's game where the game is becoming so much more space oriented, like you can't just have big brooding guys inside that can't move to your degree. Like you just can't have that anymore. So, I mean, you think about even how the center position, like you mentioned Biotish, but like I even think about guys like Jason Kelsey and Garrett Bradbury and like so many great athletes.
Obviously. You look at Jason Kelsey's film. I feel like every single week you're getting 2 plays coming out on Twitter where he's, pulling 20 yards downfield, just pancaking DBs on some screenplay. It's great to see. Yeah. But, I think I bring a good versatility to the offensive line, especially because a lot of offensive tackle recruits nowadays, you got like a 6'7" kid, he's 250 pounds, he's not gonna be able to play on the interior. I'm closer to 300 now. I'm 296 now. So, when I get into college, I'll be able to play because I have the athleticism to play on the outside, but I can really be moved around a lot, which I think is great because you want a guy who can do that. Coach Rudolph was saying he likes to sign, obviously 4 guys a class. He likes to sign 2 or 3 tackles, and then he will sign maybe an interior guy, but he always likes to sign one guy who can just play all 5 positions because he wants to have a guy who's versatile enough. So if someone gets hurt, move him in at right guard, move him in at left tackle, just play anywhere that you need him, And I think for me, that gives me a good opportunity to play. If I'm locked in, I can only play center, I can only play guard. That's only 2 or 3 spots I can play. If I can only play tackle, it's only 2 spots. If I can play all 5, I can play so much sooner if someone goes down or if that's just the need that arises, which I think puts me in a really good spot.
Yeah, I mean, I think of some of the best offensive linemen Notre Dame has even had. I mean, Mike McGlinchey was a left tackle, obviously got drafted, but he started at right tackle for a year before he kind of hit that spot. Ronnie Stanley was another guy that wasn't a one-position guy at Notre Dame. So you're right, man. Like there's a lot of guys. Tommy Kramer was a guy that started at right tackle and then moved inside the guard over the last few years of his career. So yes, the versatility obviously is a big selling point, I think. And I think that's a great point to just kind of highlight there a little bit. Let me ask you, Rowan, because I probably should have asked you earlier in the podcast about this, but I'm just curious about when I'm asking you, what are you looking for in a school, right? Just full scope again, larger scope. What are you looking for from a, what are some, I guess, non-negotiables? Like I need this, I need that, I need this in order to find the best possible spot for myself at the next level.
Yeah, definitely. A great school. That's a non-negotiable for me. I want to go to a school that, like Notre Dame, right? Notre Dame is an extremely hard school to get into. I have good grades, but I don't have Notre Dame grades, But using football, I can get into that school and I can get a phenomenal degree. That's something to look at, using football to get you to better opportunities. So that's a key thing for me is a great degree coming out. Offensive line tradition is really important. You want to be at a school as an offensive lineman that has that tradition. That's something that's important. And you get a feel for that when you're at the right school. You just know. Again, Notre Dame has that. Fit, definitely. Do I fit in at that school? Do I fit the culture of that program? Do I fit what they're looking for? And how much of a priority am I to that school? And that's another good thing with Notre Dame, especially Joe Rudolph. Coach Rudolph, what does he offer? 7 guys a class?
Yeah,
he's not offering a kid that's not a priority.
Yep.
Every kid he offers is a priority. So that if he's offering you, he wants you at his school. That's always going to be a thing that matters to him. So that is a good feeling, and then I know from him, from what he's telling me, is I would fit in perfectly with that offensive line group they have,
Yeah.
And then as well as I want to be on a team where, grades matter, academics matter. Like that's an important part of it. I don't really want to go to a school where it's, you don't have great grades on the team. You want academics to be a part of it. That's how I feel.
So my last question for you is just kind of like a future outlook a little bit. Cause I mean, I'm asking you all these recruiting questions, obviously, but you're obviously also preparing for your junior year of high school, and being able to have a great season coming up. So what do the next few months look like from you? It could be from a visit perspective. It could be just from a general workout perspective. Is there a timeline on trying to make some type of commitments? Like what does your next couple months just look like for you?
Yeah, so obviously next couple of weeks, dead period. July 28th, I think I'm going to go down and see Texas A&M, and then that weekend I'm going to see Michigan as well. And then that's going to be it for the summer.
Nice.
Then I think I have 2 weeks after that where I just have workouts, and then camp starts up for me. Got my first game September 2nd. And then my games are on Saturdays, which makes it difficult to get out to see games. However, on I think the 17th or like the 22nd, I have a Friday game, and then the next day I'll be at the Ohio State game at Notre Dame.
Oh, nice.
So that's my plan. And then same thing I have one more Friday game, which is on October 27th. Next day I'll be at the Ohio State at Wisconsin game.
Nice.
So I wanted to get that all planned out. I think that's, makes it easy for me, so I don't have to worry about it during the season, which makes my life a little easier. I can just focus on school and playing football, and that is my plan as well, because Texas A&M, I just want to see it. I think I haven't gone down south to see I haven't seen any Southern SEC schools yet. So I think I'd like to get down there and just see it, and then kind of my favorite three right now are Michigan, Notre Dame, Wisconsin. So obviously I went, to the Midwest. I took my trip of all three of those schools 3 weeks ago now. And then my plan is I can't get to a Michigan game. So I'm going to see Michigan, this summer. And then I can get to a Notre Dame game. So I'm going to go to Notre Dame. Then I'm going to go to Wisconsin, And then going forward from that, I'd like to, because I'm already trying to get it figured out everything. So next spring, I'd like to probably do what I did a couple weeks ago and see each of those schools, like Notre Dame 2 days, Michigan 2 days, Wisconsin 2 days before official visits, And then in terms of making a commitment, I'd like to have that done before next season starts.
Nice.
I don't know when it will be. I don't know if it'll be next May. I'm thinking it'll probably be after officials. I don't know. But before the season, definitely. I don't want to be in season thinking about where I'm going to go play football. I think that's a lot. That's not going to be easy when I have the season going on to make such a big choice. So That's something I'd like to get out of the way.
Yeah. Nah, you definitely want to enjoy senior year and just kind of focus on that last go around. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So yes. I don't want to have that commitment kind of, over my head for 3 months while I'm in season. I'd like to get it done with, this time next year, something like that. And then it's just done, and then play my season, get to signing day. I'm good to go. And then I think I'll probably early enroll. That's kind of where my head's at right now. That's in like 16 months, 18 months, so I don't really know, but that's kind of my thought currently, because I feel like when I find the school that I want to go to, I'm going to want to be there as soon as I can, So if I can early enroll, that's, I'm going to want to be at that place. If that's the place for me, I'm going to want to be there as soon as possible.
Man, you're very thorough, man. You're thinking 18 months out. My wife wishes I could think like a week out. So,
Yeah, no, this is about the only thing I'm thinking, more than 5 days ahead on.
I love it, man. I love it. Again, joined by Rowan Byrne, star offensive lineman out of the state of New York in the 2025 recruiting class. Top priority, obviously, near the top of the list for Notre Dame in the 2025 class in general, and obviously definitely at offensive line. Rowan, appreciate you again, man. I know this is a very busy time. I know we're in a dead period, but you still have obviously football workouts and trying to enjoy the summer the way you can. But I appreciate you for joining the Irish Breakdown podcast, man. I hope to have you back on again.
Yeah, of course. It'll be great. Just let me know. Thank you.
Well, folks, that was Mr. Rowan Byrne. Of course, I own a prep in the state of New York, 2025 offensive line target for the University of Notre Dame. I hope you all enjoyed that podcast. I especially really I honestly had Rowan on a little bit beforehand and was just kind of talking his ear off a little bit because he was a really smart young man, really gracious with his time. I think everybody enjoyed it a little bit, kind of hearing from him and, just getting a little bit of insight into the class for 2025 and one of the top targets on the board, offensive line, Rowan Byrne. I mean, Brian, it was very similar to Justin Thurman when I had him on. I was just like, yep, it's a Notre Dame kid,
Yeah.
he
fits
that billing.
He's a very sharp kid, Ryan. My only question with him is his timeline's a little interesting. We're going to see kind of how recruiting goes at that position over the next 12 months, basically to see if he's in position to be able to carry out his timeline, right? If Notre Dame's where he wants to be or not. But Michigan, Wisconsin, Notre Dame, it's going to be a battle, right? But the best comment that somebody made during his interview, Ryan, was this one down here from D. Troll Hunter, which I thought this was great. He goes, this kid seems like he has a wife and 2 kids and a dog at home. Like, right? Like
Yeah.
You're absolutely right. Like, absolutely right. Like, that's exactly how this kid felt. Like, he's just a veteran kid that's just really, really savvy
Yes.
kid, and a big physical kid too, Ryan. So I like him. He's a take for Notre Dame. Somebody asked that a couple times. He is a take for Notre Dame right now. The offensive line board is not big right now. We'll dive deeper into it as we get down closer to that. We'll have a 2025 offensive line breakdown here at some point in time, but Notre Dame's got a impressive early list so far. There's no doubt about it.
They do. And Rowan obviously is a big reason for that. I love the conversation I had with him about the position flexibility he has, the ability to play multiple spots. Obviously, Coach Rudolph sees him as an interior player, but not because, and he even said this, not because he's not a good athlete, not because he isn't big and strong. It's because he thinks that he can utilize the versatility he has from a foot quickness perspective, from a size perspective, from a power perspective as an interior offensive lineman. And if you saw what some of his offensive linemen were at Wisconsin, he was pulling guys to the perimeter a lot, both on the interior at guard and at center. I mean, he compared him to Tyler Biotish. So very interesting young man, no doubt.
So that's going to do it for this portion of the show, Ryan. Obviously, that was Rowan Byrne, who is a massive and talented offensive lineman from the 2025 class. Does not seem like a 2025 kid. That does not seem like a rising junior in high school. Going to be interesting to see how that offensive line board evolves. We're going to go to a mailbag next, folks. But before we do us a favor, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, hit the notification bell, share this podcast, and leave us a 5-star review if you're listening via podcast platform. And if you've not already done so, sign up for the message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. We've had a ton of signups here in the last couple of weeks, including we had some new gold members sign up this weekend, Ryan. I had a couple new gold members sign up, which is always great. So we appreciate that. So definitely sign up for the Irish Breakdown, the Champions Lounge at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So it's mailbag time, Ryan, and we had a few super chats to start off with. Number one from Raymond Harton. Hey, he said, for Rita, thank you. Thank you very much, Raymond. I appreciate that very, very much. He had another one said, just showing support for my favorite show. Keep up the amazing work, guys. Raymond, we really, really do appreciate that. Your support and time and all that different stuff. We love it, man. And Raymond is also, by the way, folks, a member of the message board. So yes, be part of that community. So let's get rocking into the mailbag questions now, Ryan.
Where we had another super chat was from Rob Osgood. Rob, thank you so much for the super chat. Guys, what type of running back or running backs do you think Notre Dame needs in the 2025 class? Who do you think Notre Dame has the best shot at? I know it's early, but I know Marcus Freeman likes to get them early. Thanks again.
With the best shot, we kind of discussed that a little bit during the show, right, Ryan? I mean, you would say it would be Thurman and Kromah, correct?
Yes. Yeah. I think Justin Thurman pretty solidly. And then, Kromah obviously Usman Kromah has a lot of interest in Notre Dame. It's about getting him to campus, obviously. And Rob, we also hit a little bit on what types, right? And it's great. Two examples are Thurman and Kromah because they're very different football players. I think that the reason that Notre Dame is so high on Justin Thurman, for instance, is because he brings a very niche skill set, the ability to, create big plays and be a mismatch weapon. And I think to really be very flexible with how he fits with some other players in this class. So I think if that right now you have the best shot at Justin Thurman, and then after that, I'm very interested, especially if it's Usman Kromah trying to pair with Justin Thurman because they are just such varying skill sets.
I would also say that I think you're looking for one of two things, right, Ryan? Just do you want a specific niche skill or you get the best overall back? I think that's always something you look for. And that's why Kromah's on the board. That's why James Simon's on the board. That's why Waltez Clark is on the board. They're just big time talents. Yep. But then there's also that whole we are looking for a specific skill set, and Justin Thurman brings that. And I think Notre Dame is also betting a little bit on Justin Thurman. Okay. I think their thought is like, listen, if we wait a year on this kid, we're not going to have much of a shot. I mean, if we don't, the only way you can get a kid like this and keep a kid like this is to be on him before everybody else gets on him, in my opinion. And I think that's part of it too. But I think they genuinely like that kid as an every down back, but it's just at the very least, he can bring that niche value to what you're trying to do. No question about it.
We had a question from David Lowe. Thank you, David. I saw where 247 ranked their most talented position groups for 2023 and had Michigan, the most talented offensive line. I do not know anything about their offensive line. Is it more talented than Notre Dame's offensive line?
See, here's my issue with that, Ryan, is right now, if I'm ranking offensive lines, just best offensive lines, take the word talented out of it. I have Michigan's ahead of Notre Dame's. I do. They have a lot. They have, 3 starters coming back from a line that was better than Notre Dame's last year, in my opinion, from a consistency standpoint, certainly. The issue that I had with that ranking is 247's ranking was most talented. Did you see this tweet, by the way, over the weekend, Ryan?
I did
We
not.
put it on the message board. I know you had your anniversary this weekend, so I know you had other stuff going on, but it was basically most talented position groups. And it was a little funky. Like some of them were like secondary. They had like Miami safeties on there, which I was like, okay. But they had Ohio State running back room, kind of that type of thing, right? They had Michigan's offensive line. And my whole thing is I don't think Michigan's offensive line is one of the 12 most individually talented rooms in the country.
Mm-hmm.
Like now, we've talked about Miles Hinton could potentially be that guy, but like the rest of like Zach Zinter's to me is not like a Quentin Nelson type of guy, but it's a really good offensive line. So if you're going to use the word, what's the most talented groups? I don't think that's the most talented offensive line in college football. And I don't think it's more talented than Notre Dame's. I mean, when you look at Joe Walt and Blake Fisher and Billy Schrauth and whoever else is going to be a guard, Zeke Correll, from a pure just talent standpoint, Notre Dame has a better line than Michigan's, but they don't have a better offensive line than Michigan right now. We'll see if that changes during the season, but that's my take on that, Ryan. What's your take on it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think it's a wording issue. I mean, that's kind of where we are with it. Again, I mean, just say the best offensive line, right?
Or the
say
best units. Here's the
groups.
best individual units, right? And instead of the word talented.
And you're talking about an offensive line that had back-to-back Joe Moore Award winners and 3 starters returning. You're like, okay, sure. Right. Okay, that's fine.
I actually think it kind of takes away from the job that Sherrone Moore's done because he has done a great job without having an elite first-round draft pick type of player on his right. He hasn't had a Joe Walt in the last 2 years.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Yes.
It says a lot about the job he's done, to be honest with you.
Yep.
Now, you know what, Ryan, we may talk about this at another time, but I would like for you to look at that list and you and I can have a conversation about it. Like they had, I don't think they had like, I don't think I'm going to pull it up because it was actually kind of an interesting conversation. Just give me a sec, Ryan. I'm going to pull this up because it's something that I put out. So it'll be easy for me to find it, but let me just get to this here real quick. But I'm very curious kind of what your thoughts are on it. So here's what they had. Here's the top 12 that they had.
Yeah.
Number 1, Ohio State wide receivers. Number 2, USC quarterbacks. Number 3, Michigan running backs. Number 4, Georgia's defensive front. Number 5, Michigan's offensive line. Number 6, Georgia's secondary. 7 is Clemson's linebackers. 8 is Penn State's running backs. 9 is LSU's linebackers. 10 is Texas's quarterbacks. 11 is Washington's receivers. And then 12 is Miami safeties. My first thought was this. I would put Alabama, if we're going to narrow it down to like a certain specific part of a secondary and not an entire secondary, I would have Alabama or Notre Dame's corners ahead of Miami safeties in the ranking, right? Miami's got good safeties, but I wouldn't have them there. In my personal opinion. Somebody else mentioned also in the chat that how is LSU's quarterbacks not on there? I mean, how many teams in the country can say they have 2 SEC caliber talents at quarterback and a Ricky Collins coming up at quarterback? So if we're going to talk about talent of the position group, not just the number 1 player, obviously Caleb Williams is a lot better than Jaden Daniels.
Right.
But I would argue I would rather have LSU's second and third stringers than USC's second and third stringer, in my opinion. So there were some interesting takes. And if we're going to talk about just talent, again, that's the word they use, talent. Ohio State has more talent at running back than Michigan. They don't have better running backs right now, but they have more talent at running back than Michigan.
Sure.
Especially when you talk about TreVeyon Henderson is the most talented running back of the 2 teams, in my opinion. And Ohio State's getting Evan Pryor back this year. And Michigan is a 1-2 punch, whereas Ohio State has really good depth at that position as well. So when you throw out that word talented, it changes the conversation a little bit, to be honest with you, Ryan. But what were some other takeaways that you had from looking at that group?
LSU linebackers was one that popped in my head because I mean I know Harold Perkins is really good, but like their best linebacker side is Omar Spates that's transferred over from Oregon State, and he's not that good. Like he's fine, you know what I mean? Like that's the best. I mean Georgia's linebackers are better than that linebacker room. 100%.
Yes, as a room.
Yeah.
A room. Absolutely agree with you on that.
Smile Munden and Dumas Johnson. Like I'll take those two over the two just comparatively. 100%. Yeah.
I also thought Georgia's secondary being that high to me. They're basically saying Georgia's secondary is their second best position group, which I don't agree with. I think it's their third. I think to your point, I think their linebackers are better than their secondary guys. But I thought that was interesting. No Bama positions on there, which I found really interesting. So I at least expected to see Bama's corners.
Bama's corners,
you know what I mean?
Bama's corner should be in the conversation. I think what hurts is if you're talking about a full secondary, they don't have any safeties coming back, obviously, right?
Agree.
So it's like,
and if it was just secondaries, but once they put Miami safeties in there, it's like, okay, well, we're just taking part of a secondary. Then Notre Dame's corners should be in there, in my opinion. As should, and Alabama's corners should absolutely be in there as well.
Kool-Aid McKistry and Terrion Arnold and Malachi Moore at nickel, and agree.
Yep. Texas's quarterbacks is actually one that I at first I did not like, but if I'm going to stick to what they said, talent, then I can understand Texas's quarterbacks, because if we're just talking God-given ability and talent, and you're going to be consistent with that. But here's my thing, Ryan, you can't have Michigan's running backs third and Michigan's offensive line fifth, and if you and LSU's linebackers ninth, if you're talking about talent, right? You know, I mean, so there's just a lack of consistency here, in my opinion. Right. I also think Washington's receivers are too low at 11. I've seen some rankings. I saw something the other day from your boy at Pro Football Focus, that kid that does all the college stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And
I see my boy. Why?
Because he's not mine. He had Washington's receiving core third coming into the season, behind, who was his number two? Oh, Texas. And I'm thinking, man, Texas's receiving core has a whole lot to prove before to me that they should be. Now, could they end up being there? I guess. You know what I mean? But like, there's a lot to prove before Texas is.
That's another one that if it's phrased as the most talented rooms, then sure. I mean, Texas is deep at wide receiver. It's just, are they all going to play up to their talent level? I mean,
sure. And so far they haven't. I mean, Xavier Worthy's coming off a very, very disappointing season.
Nair got hurt last year, transferring over.
AD Mitchell's been banged up. He hasn't been able to stay healthy and put up a ton of production. So there just was a little bit of a lack of consistency. Overall, I didn't think it was a terrible list. I mean, there's some things that I would disagree with, but there's none that I looked at. I was like, wow, that is the dumbest thing ever, having that group on there. Or that.
Do they have Georgia's offensive line on there anywhere? Oh, I think Georgia's offensive line is stupid.
That's kind of my thing, though, Ryan. If you're going to look at all the parts about Georgia, right? Tight ends, linebackers, offensive line, like their secondary is not their second best position group.
I might say their offensive line's their top as far as just pure talent, man. That group is stupid talent.
So I didn't understand it. Well, what'd you think of Clemson at 7? I'm a little not sure of how I feel about because I like Barrett Carter a lot. They were the linebackers were 7th. Like I like Barrett Carter. I do.
Yep.
I didn't think he was great last year. He's very talented. I'm just still not on the Jeremiah Trotter bandwagon yet, to be honest.
It's a name thing. It's a name thing.
Yeah. He's a good player. Don't get me wrong. He's a good football player, but
I would take that linebacker group over LSU's though, which is
as a group, because you got Keith McGuire, is in that conversation. You've got Levante Bentley, I think is still there. They had some guys that played last year, but Harold Perkins is really, really good.
Very good.
But not enough to have them over other whole units at linebacker.
Exactly.
Because basically with that ranking, they're saying that LSU has the second best the second most talented linebacker room in college football, and I don't think that's accurate. Even as good as Harold Perkins is, I don't think that's
that. I mean, that basically goes like, Brian, like when you're saying it like that, it's like basically they're saying Harold Perkins is greater than both Barrett Carter and Jeremiah Trotter together. And they had
Clemson higher.
Oh, they had Clemson a little
Yeah,
higher.
that's. I'm
Okay.
sorry if I might have said it backwards, Ryan. They had Clemson
No
7
worries.
and LSU number 9. So they had LSU
Yes.
as the second best linebacker room in the country. But I think there's a lot of linebacking cores. You could say if look at a Georgia, for example. I think the Georgia example you gave is a perfect example because Georgia was very talented at linebacker last year. They were just young.
Yes, they were.
Right. I mean, that was kind of. I mean, the Munden was this true sophomore last year. I believe Dumas Johnson was also a true sophomore last year.
They're both sophomores last year. Yeah.
Yeah, like true sophomores, I believe.
Yes.
Chas Chambliss comes back this year. I mean, they've got some really talented young players, man. And so
it's not often that you can lose Jalen Carter and a couple other guys and be like, our defense might be better this year.
I mean, again, don't get me wrong, Ryan. Harold Perkins is phenomenal. I watched the LSU Alabama game this weekend. He's very good. Very good.
Oh, he's probably the best linebacker in the country, but again,
probably
full rooms.
Yeah.
I mean, that's it.
But is he that much better than Georgia's best guy, whoever you think that might be? Yeah. That he then vaults the number 2 and number 3 guys as a unit above what Georgia has? I'm not sure but I also don't think you should put like 5 Georgia position groups in the top 12 because then you're just getting silly and it's also not accurate. But it was an interesting list. I appreciated the list, Ryan, because I felt like there was at least some thought, like having Michigan's running back room number 3. If you were to say we're going to talk about just the best position groups coming into the season, I'd say okay. There's, Blake Corum and Donovan Edwards is a pretty nasty 1-2 punch, right? And to me, right now, we're going to do a show on CFB Nation this summer. We're going to break down each position group, and Michigan's probably going to be my number 1 running back room right now, as far as just best. But again, you use the word talented. And if you were to say best, I would have no issue with where Michigan's offensive line and running back room is. But if you're going to say best, then you absolutely need to remove LSU and Texas from this conversation. So like that, that's my only real big issue with it, Ryan. It's just that lack of consistency of how they, that word is applied. Right. But it was a good list. I like stuff like that. It was a fun conversation, and there are some good takes in the chat from people. This is why folks, you need to be on the board, because we had some good conversation from it, in my opinion. People talking about different aspects of it. Christopher Crosby mentioned that he would take LSU's quarterback room over Texas's, and I'm like, you know what? I can't push back too much on that. For this year, yeah. So there was some good conversation that came from it. It was fun talk.
Michael with a question. Thank you, Michael. What have you seen from Luke Talick? And if he developed, how could you potentially see his future unfolding at Notre Dame? I'm very intrigued how that could turn out. Thanks.
So obviously we haven't seen him since he's been at Notre Dame. So let's just talk about what we think of him as a prospect, Ryan. And we had Luke on our show, by the way, for those who didn't see it on signing day.
Yeah. I mean, the kid is, for people that don't know the backstory, very briefly, 6'3", 190 pound safety out of the state of Wyoming. His his whole family basically goes to the University of Wyoming. He had multiple Pac-12 offers to Utah, to Washington State, to Oregon State to play safety, like legitimate compatible offers. He decided that he wanted to go to Notre Dame because he's a Notre Dame fan. Where I see him, Michael, personally, is 6'3", 190 pounds. I think he's a good athlete overall. I think he moves well. And I think he is a heavy, heavy hitter, man. He's got a nose for the football. So I think long term, he might be a rover eventually. But I think that right now you're going to see him as a safety for this Notre Dame team, fighting to, on the practice squad, quote unquote, for a year until maybe he gets a scholarship at some point, because I think that he has enough talent to do that. I would be very surprised if Luke was not a scholarship player at some point in his Notre Dame career, relatively early. I think that he has the opportunity to play at the University of Notre Dame when all is said and done. I would not be surprised if he was a rover at the end of the day, and I would not be surprised if he was a multi-year contributor as a special teams player at the very least, because I think he's that type of player.
I do not anticipate Luke Talick being a walk-on for very long at Notre Dame, Ryan. I don't. This is not your typical walk-on. No, this is one of the better walk-on classes I've seen at Notre Dame in a long time. Yep. You talk about him, Jordan Faison, Henry Garrity. Yep. Their next long snapper probably is in the freshman class. The Cross kid, I think it's pronounced Cross. It's Kros, right? But I think it's pronounced Cross. I could be wrong.
I believe so.
So this freshman walk-on class is impressive. It really is. It really is. We got another one from Michael too, Ryan. So we'll slide into this one next.
Michael says, in the 2025 class, who could you see potentially committing to Notre Dame who is somewhat local to South Bend? Who could be a leader in the building, the class similar to Drake Bowen and CJ Carr or Cam Williams?
That's a good one, Ryan, because I don't know. I'm hoping and wishing and praying that it's Taylor Taylor. That's who I'm hoping it is, right? Chicago kid, just outside of Chicago in Geneva.
Yep.
Great personality, Ryan. And you see his mom, like talk to his mom, you hear about his mom for like a minute. You're like, yeah, okay, I see where he gets it from, right? I mean, just really sharp kid. And I hope he's that guy. Other than him, you look at it and say, Ryan, there's not a ton of kids that I would say are local kids that I would throw into that category. Obviously, you hope that Davion Dixon, since he's an early commit, Nate Roberts, those guys are like big names. I think Nate Roberts has the kind of personality that could be kind of that. I wouldn't count him as local though, right? Because the question was geared towards more some of the local kids who can be around all the time. I don't really know who those guys necessarily would be. I mean, maybe if you're able to get Mark Zachary in the class, maybe he might be one.
Christopher Burgess, maybe.
Yeah, Christopher Burgess. But to me, I don't know that I would chalk Christopher Burgess up as that kind of player just yet. I mean, these guys are still rising juniors, so that's also part of it. These kids are still growing and developing. So I don't know that there's as natural of a fit locally as we've seen in past years as of right now. But that doesn't mean that you can't have great leaders in the class. It just means it might have to come from guys who aren't as close by, right? So, I mean, if they're able to somehow get Deuce Knight, which, fingers crossed, we'll see how that one goes. But he's going to be a leader no matter where he's from, right? Yes. I mean, that's just the reality of it. So, you'll have guys like that, Ryan, that will take a leadership mantle. They just may not be as close by. But who's that local guy? That's a really good question. I'm actually doing a little search right here real quick, Ryan, because there's a kid that popped in my head that might actually be a good one, but I want to see what the distance is from South Bend here real quick first before I do it. Yeah, it's actually not bad. There's Waukesha, Wisconsin's about 3.5 hours away. It's a big old offensive lineman from Waukesha named Owen Strebig up there. Maybe him. Because he has kind of an outgoing personality. And look, he has proven he has no problem getting to campus.
No, not at all. Not at all. Yeah. You want to know a kid that's really interested in Notre Dame, guys? You want to talk about reading the tea leaves? Talk about a kid that's been to the campus 3 times this offseason as a sophomore in high school.
Coming back again at the end of the month. So, yeah. And we get asked, who's the first guy off the bus for you? Whenever Owen Strebig shows up to Notre Dame, he will be the first guy off the bus for me.
He's going to be 6'8", 320 pounds, sophomore year of college.
He is a massive kid. I'm actually going to pull something up here real quick, Ryan, because this picture that he has of him. So y'all know Marcus Freeman is not some little tiny football coach, right? He's not your typical
linebacker in the end.
Yes. He is not like a Brian Kelly. This is not a shot on Brian Kelly. Brian Kelly was little. He was, not a very big guy. Marcus Freeman, 6'1"-ish. He's, pretty ripped up guy. I'm going to show you this. And this is just, that kid dwarfs Marcus Freeman. I mean, that is a nutty picture. Like, he makes Marcus Freeman look little. Like
a lot of these offensive linemen too, man. Like the Rowan Byrne kid too. Yeah. It's like, what the heck?
And look at him, right? He's not fat at all. Like that's the thing. He's just a big old country boy. But he's not like a big fat kid you got to work a bunch of weight off of. Like, I mean, his lanyard's hanging straight down. I mean, that's a big boy right there. So he could potentially be one, Ryan, if you're going to focus on the geography aspect of it. I could see, and he's a highly ranked kid. Right, he's going to be. I think he's like a top 100 kind of kid, so he could be one. Just got to be able to close on him, man. Just got to be able to close on him.
Yep. It's a good one. He's a very good one. Yep. We had a question from Rob Osgood who said, "Mailbag, who, in your opinion, in the 2025 running back group, could one day switch to wide receiver?" I have an easy answer. Answer. On the board, it's Dyer Hill out of the
Yeah.
state of Missouri. He's a
Well,
space player type.
There's
of thing.
two
Yeah.
for me,
Yeah.
Ryan. He's
Yeah.
one. The other one would be Waltez Clark. That kid could easily move to wide receiver. I'm not saying I would do it.
Yep.
But yeah, he's definitely one who could move to wide receiver. I don't see Justin Thurman as a receiver. I see him as more of a running back that you can do some things with, but I don't really see him.
I think Torrey Blaylock could if you wanted to, but like no need for it. Yeah.
Sure. Absolutely.
We had a question from David Lowe. Thank you, David. I remember last year around this time, we were on fire on the recruiting trail. How many 2024 recruits could you see Notre Dame landing in July?
Well, I think at most two. I mean,
I was going to say one. Yeah.
At most two, right?
Yeah.
I mean, Kingston and Gearby Lambert are both going to make a decision in July. So that, and we could say three if we want to still count Davis Andrews as a 24 kid. I could see them getting him as well.
Sure.
But we're kind of not counting him as a 24 kid as of right now, although I would love it if he changes mind. I said this the other day to a friend of mine. So, for all the angst about safety recruiting, if Davis Andrews just somehow decided, you know what, I'm going to do a mission after my football career is over, all of a sudden the safety class takes a whole different look if you had Bronte Johnson and Davis Andrews in it. I don't care what his ranking says. I do not care one bit. Davis Andrews is a really good football player, So yeah, I would love to see that, but as of right now, that's just not gonna happen.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, that at most three as of right now.
Yeah.
But to a bigger point, Ryan,
Yeah.
we were having this conversation on the message board, and I made this point. So much of how we evaluate this recruiting class is based on emotion, which comes from timing. The point that I made is this: if Notre Dame's first, let's just say Notre Dame's first 5 commitments were, I'm going to pull up their commit list real quick. Let's say their first 5 commitments in the class. So like last summer, right? Their first 5 commitments. Teddy Rizak committed. Sean Silviano committed. Say Bodie Cahoon committed. Tabron Benny Powell committed. And Carson Hobbs committed. Those are your first 5 commitments. And Notre Dame picked up 5 kids in June. If those 5 kids were CJ Carr, Cam Williams, I'm trying to go look at some of the those two, and Kedron Young, who you did get in July, Peter Jones, and either Leonard Moore or one of those guys, right? The more highly ranked guys. If those were the 5 commitments they got in June, the emotional reaction that Notre Dame fans would have right now is we're on fire.
Yeah.
Right. Same kids, same exact class. And I think that's something that sometimes we got to think about is, right, it's looking at what they land, not who they missed on or when kids committed. It's who they have in the class. And I think sometimes we as fans can get a little bit in our feelings a little bit because of when kids commit. Well, Notre Dame landed all their big dogs early this time, right? It doesn't take away from how good the class is. At the same time, I do believe that momentum is also a thing. And kids look at that because kids react that way too. If grown-ups are acting that way, then kids are acting that way too. Man, that school's hot. Right. And it's right or wrong. That's just the reality of it. But that kind of adds a little bit to the I don't want to say it's not negativity, but negative energy, a little bit of negative energy going around about the recruiting class right now, in my opinion.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. But I mean, to your point, David, I think talking it out, I think 2 is the number I could potentially see in July. Now that I'm thinking about it, possibly 3, but I think 2 is the number.
3. Who would be the possible third for you? Shaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So just so we're on the same page, Kingston, Shaw, and Gearby Lambert, right? Those are the 3.
Yeah. Those are the 3.
We have a few super chats down here, Ryan, as well.
Week 0 Productions says, thank you for the super chat, by the way. Did my own interview with 2025 5-star Nathaniel Wusu-Boateng, and my favorite quote was, "Location doesn't mean anything to me in my recruitment. Location or weather doesn't matter if you have that dog in you." Does he end up at Notre Dame?
And then he had another one kind of along the same lines.
He also said voluntarily, NIL money doesn't mean anything to me. I know and saw firsthand what Notre Dame did for my brother, and I know I can do the same thing. Seems very Notre Dame fit. Surprised there isn't much coverage on him.
I mean, we
There's not
literally
much
had a story
coverage
about
on
him
him.
last
I know,
week.
I just had a story last
Yeah.
week on him, man. Come on.
I mean, we haven't really done a lot on the 25 class right now, and he's not anywhere close to making a decision. So, yeah, Ryan had an interview with him last week. We talked about him on the show last week, but I mean, there's no doubt he's a Notre Dame type of kid, and he's hearing a lot of good things about from his brother. I'm curious about your own personal interview, where that came from. That's a little interesting. So I would not encourage people to just start trying to interview these kids on their own unless you were doing something. But I'd be just curious, kind of, what platform that was on. Just curious, not no criticism, just curious. But no, I mean, Ryan, he you've said this. He definitely seems like a Notre Dame type of kid. The question is, he's also a big time football player that has everybody in the country coming after him.
Yep,
it's a little different than they beat Wake Forest and Michigan State for his brother. It's a little different situation.
And it is also very different because, again, he's an IMG Academy kid. It's a little bit of a different type of IMG Academy kid, but his other top schools are all Florida schools. So it's literally Notre Dame versus Florida State, Miami, Florida, right at this point. So that's, we'll see. We'll see.
All right, Ryan, let's get to it. We have another super chat down here from Ethan.
Ethan says, thank you so much for the super chat. I said, one guy on each side of the ball who isn't talked about a ton, you think has a surprisingly good season this year?
That's a good one. I like questions like that, Ryan. So guys that aren't getting talked about a ton. Mitchell Evans, I feel like, is not getting talked a lot about on offense. It's always like, well, when's Raridan going to be back? Is Holden State's going to be a breakout? For very good reason. And Mitchell's a guy that has, 4 career catches? And we're not talking about him a lot. I could see him being a 30, 40-plus catch guy this season that could have a lot of people talking about him. Absolutely. I mean, the thing is, Chris Tyree's not getting a lot of does not get a lot of talk from fans. I could see Chris having a surprisingly good season at receiver, being a big play guy. Those one of those two would be the ones for me, Ryan. One of those two. You could pick either one of those. Defensively, a guy that isn't being talked about a ton that I think could have a surprisingly good season. I'm trying to think who we don't talk about a ton. I feel like we talk about a lot of guys, but I know there's some we haven't talked to. Would you
I was thinking Gabriel Rubio on defense as kind of the main backup at nose tackle to be a really plus run defender.
Yeah.
And offensively, I was actually thinking Zeke Correll because I feel like no one ever talks about Zeke Correll.
That's a good one. I
would be shocked if year 2 as a starting center, he's like, oh, wow, Zeke Correll's one of the top 5 centers of college football this year.
What's funny is somebody on the message board the other day is like, we only have 2, proven players coming back. And I'm like, who's the 2 you're talking about? Zeke Correll and Joe Alt? Because, they need to be on that list. Gabriel Rubio's, I know Tim O'Malley's very high. He and I, we were talking, and he always brings up Gabriel Rubio. He's very high on Gabriel Rubio as well. I could see that. If the light goes on for Ramon Henderson, I could see that one going off.
Yeah, let's hope.
I could. And I feel like since he committed, we don't talk about Antonio Carter at all.
I know.
Since he committed,
we haven't seen him. Yeah,
I could definitely see him being a guy that by the end of the year's a dude that we're like, man, I'm really glad they got him. I could see him being one of that guy. So there's some options, but so if I had to pick one, I'm just gonna go with on offense. I'm gonna go with Mitchell Evans as a guy that's not being talked a lot about. And on defense, my one is going to be. This is a tough one. I'm gonna say. I'm going to have some fun. You know who we don't talk about a lot? Xavier Watts. I feel like we don't talk nearly enough about him, and we should. I'm going to go Xavier Watts. I don't think we talk about him enough, so I'm going to go Xavier Watts. That's one for me.
Someone said Steve Angeli. That is the worst case scenario if that is the case. But
well, unless he has a good season, then I can live with it. But yeah, that's not.
That means Sam Hartman got hurt.
Yeah. So. Adam said Howard Cross. I feel like we talk about Howard a lot. Right. That's the only reason I don't think about him. We talk about him quite a bit about how, at least I do. I feel like I talk about him a lot. You haven't been on the show as much lately, Ryan. We definitely have talked about him a lot in some of our other shows. But Jason Onye, we talk about him quite a bit. Yeah. So the whole point is not these are the only guys. Riley Mills, we talk about Riley a lot. That's another one we talk about a lot. So, yeah, it's interesting. Somebody said Rocco Spindler. It's a good one. We don't talk about him a ton. I could see him. I could see him. Yeah, it's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting for sure. Somebody said Jaden Greathouse. It's definitely not a person we have a problem talking about on the show. That's for sure.
I've mentioned his name a couple times in my life.
Yep.
We had a question from USMA87. What do you think the odds are that coaches Dylan McCullough, and Chancey Stuckey are both on the staff in 2024?
I honestly don't know. I haven't even thought about it. I'm just trying to get through the 23 season. Look, the reality is, guys, they're going to lose coaches. If Notre Dame's good, they're going to lose coaches. It's a part of the business, and it's an okay part of the business, because if you lose coaches, like let's just say Dylan McCullough gets his wish and he gets a head coaching job next year at a Big Ten school, which I think he's earned it, right? My only advice to Coach McCullough is, how about you be a little bit more accessible? Put yourself out there a little bit more, other than just like your backstory, which is an amazing story, but just get in front of the camera a little bit more, and just kind of be a little bit more of a presence, because I think there's a lot to like there. He just is kind of one of those, I'm doing my job and being a dad kind of guys. I'm like, that's great. I mean, as a man, respect the heck out of you for it. But if you're trying to build your brand to become a head coach, I'd like to see it be a little bit more involved, But let's say he gets a Big Ten job. Oh, okay, that's great. I mean, that's awesome, because A, it's great for him, and B, if you want to be an assistant coach to become a head coach, aren't you going to go to a school that just put a guy in there at that position, right? I mean, that's part of the reason Charles Huff picked Alabama over Notre Dame, right? When he was leaving Penn State, was he knew that Alabama gave him a quicker path to becoming head coach. And guess what? It did. So he's now the head coach at Marshall. So look, they're going to lose guys. I don't know who, I don't know when. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it. So I don't know what the odds are. I'm just glad they're going to be on the team for 20, or on the part of the program for 23. And once 23 is over, we'll have more time to think about that stuff. But look, they're both excellent coaches. They're going to be in high demand. That's the one thing I can say are very high odds. They're both going to be in high demand this season. There's no doubt about that.
A lot of people are going to want both of them.
Yeah, absolutely.
Riker Ferg says, if you had to pull all of your eggs into one running back for the 2025 class, who would it be?
So it basically is kind of saying, like, if you could get one guy, who would that one guy that you would want in this class?
Man, I mean, if I could get anybody I wanted, it would probably be Waltez Clark. But you could convince me of a couple other guys. I mean, Justin Thurman's really good. Usman Kromah is awesome. Like, there's a lot of good running backs, but I would probably go Waltez Clark. I think he might have the highest upside. I mean, he's really good. And I'm very confident, to your question, Riker, if Dylan McCullough is here for a couple years, I am very confident with him developing a guy like a Waltez Clark into a stud.
I'm going to go with James Simon, because for a couple reasons. I think he's very talented. He definitely does not have the ceiling that Waltez Clark has, Ryan. You nailed that. But I think he's got a really high floor. But for me, it's more of, he has such a unique style of play that I don't think they have that make you miss guy on the roster right now, other than maybe Jeremiah Love. But even him, he's more of a slasher, one cut, and then uses home run speed kind of guy. He can make some quick cuts. I think James Simon, we talked about complementary skills. I think James Simon probably has the most complementary skill set of any of the backs when you look at what is currently on the Notre Dame roster. But end of the day, Riker, you're not wrong by going with Thurman, like Ryan talked about, Waltez Clark, like Ryan talked about, just James Simon, like I'm talking about, or Usman Kromah. I mean, there's really no bad choice in that group if you were to pick one. But
pick your flavor.
Exactly. We got Chen Boat. Check it out, Ryan. He's got the IB hoodie on in the avatar. Digging that. Thank you for that.
And he wants more gear, man. He said, Brian, what's a guy got to do to get an IB embroidered dad hat in the store?
We had one, but I took it down. I'm going to look for a different one. So I'll work on that one, and I'll let you know when I do, for sure. Because that's been on my list of things to do, Ryan, but we've had some things going on that have kept me pretty busy, and I haven't had a chance to get to that stuff, but it's on my long list of to-do things to do before the season. But yeah, dad hats, I'll look into that. I'll definitely look into that. That's a good idea. Good reminder.
Connor O'Doherty with a question. He says, I'm late. If there's a mailbag today, which there is, What are your guys' top 10 2024 recruits nationally? The release of the suspect on 3 rankings made me want a Driscoll ranking site so much more.
I had a buddy text me today, and he's like, "Don't read the on 3 rankings." Like, too late. Who's my top 10? I haven't done one yet, Ryan, so I don't really have a top 10. I can tell you, I could maybe tell you a couple guys on there, but I'm going to actually have a top 150 actually before the season comes out, so I'll have a better idea then. But yeah, there will be a Driscoll rankings, and
Nice.
again, that'll be CFB Nation. That's part of the plan, but it's a long-term plan. There's a lot of things that Irish breakdown that require my attention right now that are preventing me from really growing that part of the business even more. But it'll come. It'll definitely come. But yeah, I'm going to have some here before the season with when I can finally sit down and actually spend the probably entire week that I'll need to just dive into the film. And because you got to find film, you don't just pop in 3 minutes of huddle film and like, oh, he's ranked 9th. You know, you spend a long time trying to find game film, talking to people that might have game film, doing all that kind of stuff. So I'll have something. I mean, I'll say this. I have started to watch a lot more film. So I've already kind of started breaking down kids. But yeah, I'll have some here before the season. And I don't mean before fall camp starts. I mean before the season starts. So, August, just so we're. I really like this question here from Archer 452.
If Notre Dame had to play one school from every Power 5 conference every year, which school from each conference would you want to play?
I dig this one. I really like this one. So let's start regionally, Ryan. Let's go Big Ten. If there was one Big Ten team, and I'll give mine, and then I'm curious to hear what yours are. If I could play any Big Ten team every year, it would be Michigan State. And I have a feeling I know who yours is going to be, and I'm close, but I've won too many words in mine for you. But it would be Michigan State. I think it's a rivalry that I respect a lot more. It's a rivalry. There's a lot more loyalty between the two schools, in my opinion. Michigan State was trying to push to get Notre Dame in the Big Ten while Michigan was fighting to keep them out of the Big Ten. So screw Michigan is my default stance in all circumstances. But I just think there's a lot of respect. And Michigan State have also – everybody talks about some of the great games Notre Dame and Michigan have played. Michigan State and Notre Dame have played in some great games with some great finish. I think of the 2006 game – everybody talks about. We always talk about Little Giants, but remember 2005 was a great game too, where Michigan State got a big lead. Notre Dame came back, sent it to overtime. Michigan State won in overtime. I was watching the game the other day. What was it? 2002 when Carlo Holiday hit. Was it Omar Jenkins? Arnez Battle on like this little quick slant route. Arnez like with a minute something left takes it the distance to win the game. There's been some great games between those two teams. The 13 game that Notre Dame won that ruined a chance for Michigan State to have an undefeated season. They went 13-1 that year, going all the way back to 1966 in the big tie. So that's a great rivalry that I have a lot of respect for, and would be a game that and as soon as I said that, Thomas Wilkinson just texted 1966, right? I mean, so we're going back decades where there's been some great matchups between Notre Dame and Michigan State. That would be the one for me that I would go with in the Big Ten. What say you, Mr. Roberts?
Mine would be Michigan. I know you don't like it, but I despise Michigan. I would love to beat Michigan every single year, and Michigan's also gaining a lot of traction as far as being one of the Midwest powers. As far as recently recruiting has picked up. They've been to back-to-back playoffs. I would like to send them back to reality in theory, potentially. Yeah. So Michigan would be mine.
I'd like to let Ohio State handle that for me. ACC. What would be the ACC team that you would want to play? And there's a few angles I could go with this one, Ryan. The one ACC team that I would like to play consistently would probably be I'm torn because part of me wants to say Miami because of that rivalry, but like Miami's just not that school anymore. And
I like playing Clemson personally.
I was going to say Florida State. There's at least a little bit of history there. Yeah. Clemson's good because if we're talking about legitimately building a schedule, let's say Notre Dame was going to say we're going to build a new schedule where we play one team from every conference. Oh, you know what? That would have to change obviously here in a couple of years. When USC goes to the Big Ten also, but as of right now, USC's would be my pick in the Pac-12, but it'll be interesting to see what changes when that happens. I'll ask that one here in a second, Ryan. But I'm gonna probably go Florida State or Miami on that one. I'll probably lean towards Miami, Ryan, just because at least there's some history there. Although I'll say this to the one you said, I really like this budding rivalry that Notre Dame and Michigan and Clemson have, because it seems to me it's one out of respect.
Yeah.
Like there's a respect between the two programs, but they battle hard. I mean, 2015 was a great game. You know, the 2020 regular season game was a great game. This year's game was hard fought, even though Notre Dame dominated. The 2018 playoff game was hard fought, even though Clemson, obviously dominated in the second half. I think I like rivalries where the teams battle the heck out of each other, but there's a respect there as well.
Yep.
And Coach Sweeney always says great things about Notre Dame. I feel like Clemson's fan base has a level of respect for Notre Dame that most fan bases don't have, because they've seen Notre Dame battle them up close and personal. I could see that one. And Archer says we hate Clemson, but there isn't any respect. That's also partly because they beat your butts almost every time they've played you guys as well. So, but Notre Dame's had a little bit more success against Clemson there, buddy. I'm just giving Archer a hard time, but I focus more on the old school rivalries, Ryan. But there's a lot of merit to what you're saying with that because they've played in some really good games, and there's a respect there that I like. Miami is just more of, I'm still living in my heyday. There's not a lot about this Miami program that makes me want to play them. That's where I'm kind of torn on that one. You know what I mean? So yeah, it's an interesting one. So let's go SEC. What's the one SEC school that you'd like to play regularly?
Oh man, that's a tough one.
I have two, and they're in the same state.
LSU, maybe.
Okay.
I mean, possibly. Yeah. I mean, Notre Dame's had some good luck at playing LSU in recent years, and obviously there's a good storyline there of why Notre Dame would want to beat LSU, right? So LSU, Tennessee is another one. Someone just popped in the chat that I would also agree with. I like Tennessee.
Tennessee and Vanderbilt are mine.
Yeah.
Tennessee, I've made this case about Tennessee before. I have Vanderbilt because I do feel like at some point you have to have a rivalry that's academically oriented as well. And so Vanderbilt would be one, but those would be my two: Vanderbilt or Vanderbilt or Tennessee. I think, and I think geographically it makes a lot more sense too, Ryan. It's it's a state away, basically. 2 states away.
Last time Notre Dame played Vanderbilt, it was a pretty good football game too. So
it was, but there's it's one of those few institutions down there that you're kind of like-minded with, with the academic emphasis and all that kind of stuff. So that would be one for me to consider. Give me one of the two Tennessee teams.
Yep.
Let's go Big 12, Ryan. We're just kind of going around the clock here, the national clock, and we're going to go with current Big 12 and current Pac-12 teams.
Okay, so I can use BYU in this one then, because I just kind of like playing.
You
BYU.
can also use like Texas and Oklahoma and them, right? So
I don't know why there's not like a huge reasoning for it, but I kind of just like playing BYU. I think BYU is an interesting team. I think that there's the religious oriented type of institution. Mm-hmm. I kind of like it.
They've played some good games too, Ryan. To your point, I mean they've had some battles. Notre Dame and BYU have had some battles. I kind of like that one. I mean, I would also consider TCU. Texas Christian, even though they don't really go by that as much anymore, they just kind of go more by TCU because, Ryan, that would give me an opportunity to get into that Dallas-Fort Worth area, which there's a lot of talent. Part of me would say Texas, but I don't know. Maybe because when I grew up playing Texas, Notre Dame just kind of whooped Texas all the time. So it's just kind of like not a really rivalry that I had a lot of respect for. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So maybe TCU.
I do think having a rivalry of a Texas school would be very advantageous, though. It would be for sure.
Agree. It's funny. One of the best games that Notre Dame ever played against a team that's currently in the Big 12 was the Cotton Bowl against Houston, the Joe Montana chicken and soup game. So there's a little bit there, but I don't know if I'd want to have that as a rivalry. But I could see Texas. I don't know. It's weird. I've never just really felt like Texas is a school that I had a ton of interest in playing all the time. I don't know why.
Yeah.
Strange, but it would make most sense, national powerhouse and all that, but it just never really been a thing for me.
Interesting though. I like TCU. It's interesting one.
Pac-12, Ryan, current Pac-12.
USC.
I'm going to ask this one two ways. So USC.
Yeah.
So once USC leaves and you have to pick another Pac-12 school of the ones we know they're going to be in there right now, who would that be?
UCLA maybe?
Well, they're going to also be in the Big 10.
Oh, they're going to. Yep. Dang. Sure.
This would be mine. I like this one.
Washington's a good one. Yeah, Washington's a good one.
There's also some history there. They've played each other before and multiple times. Somebody said Cal. I wouldn't have a lot of interest in playing Cal. I have no interest in playing Stanford long term.
Maybe Oregon.
One for me because of recruiting, I would say Arizona. I would want to get down into Arizona. That's a budding state, man. That's a booming state from a talent standpoint.
Yeah.
So I could say Arizona, but Washington or Arizona would be the ones for me.
Arizona's interesting.
Yeah.
Someone said Oregon State. No thanks. I don't want any
Well,
of that.
That's some painful memories coming back right there, man. But Arizona would be one for me. That's just geographic. There's no ties there. There's no rivalry there. It just would be pure.
Oregon State would also be like one of those pesky games that you just get beat up in all the time. Just like, nah, I'm good, man. I don't need that.
And there's nothing in it for beating you, for you beating them. Nothing.
Yeah.
Nothing in it for you to beat
that
them.
One player from Oregon every 7 years. Like,
yeah.
I'm good, man.
Like we're at least Arizona, that's like a state where it's starting to really produce a lot more talent. But it's slim pickings.
Completely honest, man. That's like one of those schools where I'm like, nope, I don't need my guys getting beat up this week. Like, I'm good.
Here's an interesting one that somebody just brought up: Utah. Like
that's another one, though, man. I feel like my bodies are just gonna get beat up all the time.
That's true.
Like, I don't know. That's true.
That's what. Then pick Vanderbilt as your SEC opponent, and you're good to go. So
sure.
That's an interesting one. But I kind of like playing one of the two Arizona schools would be one for me. I do.
One.
I do.
I would like just seeing them play Utah at some point, though, because I have a lot of respect for that coaching staff. But
I'll tell you, their fans when they came here in 2010 were awesome, really cool fans, like really cool fans. So good question. Art, try a little bit of fun with that one. We have a couple of super chats down here we'll get to here, Ryan.
Charlie Weiss's last belt loop. Thank you, Charlie. Says in 2023, Drake Bowen seemed to be the lead recruiter. 2024, CJ Carr. Who do you see in 2025 being a big recruiter in the class, or is it way too soon to make that option? It's a great question, Charlie. I would also say, though, like, can we add in Cam Williams and Carson Hobbs into the 2024 bucket? Like, it's not just CJ, right? Like, it's really not.
Big time. CJ gets the credit, Ryan, because he's the quarterback. But, I mean, I hear Cam Williams' name mentioned just as much, if not more,
100%.
Than I do CJ's, honestly.
I agree.
Jack Larson is also very involved in helping recruiting, and nobody talks about him at all.
Ever.
So it's there's several guys that are strong recruiters in this class.
I mean, Charlie, it's a tough question because Notre Dame only has 2 commits, obviously, in 2025, and Davion Dixon and Nate Roberts. I do think that both of them can be really good recruiters for him, because I will say this: a big reason why Jarquez Carter, who is another defensive tackle in the state of Florida, is visiting Notre Dame at the end of the month, because of his relationship with Davion Dixon. Like, that's a big part of this conversation, right? I also think Nate Roberts. Nate's not like the most social media heavy guy, so I don't know how that would react, but I think people would listen to Nate Roberts if he said something, right? Like, I definitely believe that, but I think it's going to be, if they land a Deuce Knight, for instance, right? Like, that's a ringleader for your class. I think one of the offensive linemen, to Brian's point, because usually the offensive linemen are super quiet. I could see both, let's say, Owen Strebig or Rowan Byrne, if either one of those guys gets in the class sometime soon. Like, those guys are outgoing, talkative offensive linemen that I could be like, yep, they're going to recruit their butts off of. So there's a few of the guys, but I think, quarterback and then a couple of those offensive linemen especially are interesting.
Telling you, I'm hoping it's Taylor Taylor. I'm going to keep saying that. Oh man, let's go with this next one here from James O'Reilly.
James says, love the show. Thank you, James. So glad I found it. Nothing against blue and golds, but Horka and Singer aren't worthy. Keep up the great work. Thank you so much.
I appreciate the kind words. I do. So I'm glad you found it too. And we'll definitely keep up the great work, the work. We'll definitely do our best. There's no doubt about it.
We had a question from John Leahy who said, based on the 2024 recruits, what style of running back is needed in 25 class to have a diverse backfield? We've talked about that a little bit, obviously, John. I mean, I think Justin Thurman brings something that you don't have a ton of on the roster right now. Like, I think that Jeremiah Love
just kind of one, right?
Yeah,
just kind of one.
Yeah, I would say so. So I think he brings that dynamic.
Can maybe chalk in Jadarian Price into that, but I just think Jadarian's a little bit of a different run. Like, Jadarian's more of an every down back type of guy to me, on top of being a home. I think Jadarian and Kedron Young are more similar, in my opinion, in running style than necessarily than Thurman and Jadarian, if that makes sense. I don't.
Yeah.
Speed wise, there's a comparison. Body type wise, a comparison. Running style is what I'm saying is a little different.
Well, I'd say that the niche really does matter. And I would say this, though. I mean, if we're kind of forecasting the future, Audric Estime, unless something terrible happens, is not going to be on the roster in 2025, right? So Usman Kromah would bring a different dimension to that, but Kedron Young will also be in the conversation. So I really think it's a pick your flavor, but I mean, I think the flavor that Notre Dame's going after is some guys that I think you said earlier, Brian, does less with more. I mean, does more with less, excuse me. And I think
does more with less.
yes.
Yeah.
I switched it up after I said it wrong
Yeah.
the first time. So.
I think I froze because you were like, this. I didn't hear it, so I apologize.
Gotcha. We had a question from James O'Reilly who says, what first-year player, transfer, or freshman not named Sam Hartman do you think will have the biggest impact this season? I think Thomas Harper will step up nicely for Tariq Bracy.
That's a good one. That's fair. That's definitely a good one, Ryan. Let's go with one on each side of the ball. First-year player or transfer not named Sam Hartman on offense that you think will have the biggest impact. I'm going to come down to one of the two early enrollees that played a bunch, that got a lot of time. I think it's going to come down to Jaden Greathouse or Rico Flores. One of those two is who I look at offensively. You could maybe consider I think Devin Ford, if there's some injuries, could definitely be that guy. I think Devin Ford could be a good back for Notre Dame. I do.
It's interesting.
We don't talk about him a ton. It's just because, again, it's about opportunity.
Yeah.
But I could see one of the two freshman receivers, just the more high ceiling guys for sure.
Jaden Greathouse would be my one pick. The other wild card is Charles Jagasaw at some point this season if he's back healthy and maybe taking over a guard spot eventually. We shall see, though.
I'm going to keep my next thought to myself because, I'm going to say it. I could see Cooper Flanagan being a surprise player for Notre Dame, especially if there's some injuries. We've said this before, Ryan. You and I have been saying this for a long time. That kid brings a skill set that they just don't have really on the tight end right now, especially with Eli Raridan now, because Eli Raridan is the only guy that brings that blocking skill set to the table like Cooper can. I could see him, making an impact this year. I just don't know if it'll be in a way that people notice. He could be a great blocker, and we'll talk about it because if he doesn't catch a ton of balls.
Sure.
But I really like Cooper Flanagan. I wish we could have seen him in a different offense in high school. I really do, because he's really good. And the last two-way player they got from De La Salle turned out to be pretty good. He'll set the school's all-time sack record. So it's not bad at all. Not bad at all.
We had a question from Jake Smith who said, I'm planning to go to my first Notre Dame game in South Bend this year. Being from Tampa, Florida, do you guys have any travel advice or general advice to make the most of the weekend?
Well, one thing I always say is try to be there for 2 full days. So if you can fly in early Friday or come in late Thursday night and spend a ton of time on campus. Man, there's stuff to do around town. There's places to eat and all that. Try to go to Rocco's or something like that. If you're looking for like a place that's kind of nostalgic, have breakfast at Original Pancake House, which is right by campus, really good food. So those type of things. But in regard to being in part of the environment, just be around all day. If they have a pep rally that day, do it. Make sure you see the trumpets under the dome, which is really trumpets in front of the dome now. Hopefully that goes back to being under the dome this year. That would be nice. It should happen. But we'll see kind of how they handle that situation this year. But just do it all. I mean, I don't know if they'll have stadium. Do they? I don't know. I think they still do stadium tours on Friday. I think they still do those. I'm not 100% sure of that. If they do that. Get to the bookstore, not on game day. It's crazy on game day. Try to get there Friday. And then definitely do the player walk. That is definitely a thing to do if you've never been to a game before. It's definitely something you got to do once, where you're there when the players come out of the Basilica. You'll definitely want to do that as well. It's a really cool deal. Really cool deal. You definitely want to try that out.
I mentioned that before. Spending as much time on campus, get there early. Yeah. They do the schedule thing online that you can find, but trumpets for sure, player walk, go to the grotto, light the candle, do all that type of stuff. It's really
walk
cool.
Around the lake. It is, especially in the fall. If you're depending on when you're coming, it is beautiful over there. Yeah, really. Late summer or fall, it's beautiful. It's just different. Late summer, September and all that, it's green. And then fall it turns this orange, red, yellow mix. It's just absolutely beautiful, absolutely stunning.
And go to the parking lot, Jake, and hang out around some of the tailgaters, man. Even if you don't drink, it's a good time. Time.
And the other thing too, Ryan, is I always tell people, and I've never said on the show, but I'll say it now: if you're making your first trip to campus, don't focus on things around the town. Focus on being on campus. Then your second trip, you can explore more of the area and the restaurants and stuff. The food is solid, but I always say eat at Legends. because you're on
Yeah,
campus.
Legends is
It's
good.
like, the food's solid. It's better than you'd think it would be for like an on-campus restaurant. I like Legends, I do. But you're right there. There's all types of Notre Dame stuff all on the walls. It's a pretty cool deal.
There's a bunch of alumni walking around. I mean, I
Yeah.
went last time I was in town, and it was Robert Hainsey and that crew were just chilling at the bar. I was like, oh, what's up, man? How's it going?
Yeah.
Type of thing. So
Yeah. Yep. All right. Let's get to this here.
Matthew Jacobs has said, I may have joined late, but how is CJ Carr not in the on 3 top 10 quarterback list? We're doing this. They have him slated at number 14. Am I missing something on, or is on 3 just that abysmal?
I think they're see, here's what I'll say. I don't care a whole lot for Charles Powers rankings, but I'll say this. There are some positions I think he's pretty good at evaluating. I do. Others, I think he's pretty not good. But I think that I think running back is one, from what I can tell, he's pretty good at. They had Jeremiah Love higher than anybody else last year. They have Keidron Young as a top 100. And it's not just Notre Dame guys. There were some other guys that I thought were really good players that other people had a little higher that he didn't have higher. So I think that's a position and that's the thing I'd say to people is like, look, you not everybody sucks at everything and not everybody's good at evaluating everything. I think he's terrible at evaluating quarterbacks, right? And it goes back to last year when he didn't have Dante Moore. He had him like barely as a top 50 guy, right? The kid that they had that's going to Michigan State that they had as a top 100 player last year. That kid has no business being a top 100 player. None.
Wait, who is this?
On 3. They're 2000 and here, I'll pull it up. It's this kid that you probably never even heard of. They had a quarterback named, where is that kid? Sam Levitt from Oregon.
I don't know him.
Who's committed to Michigan, who's going to Michigan State. He's a mediocre player. Everybody else, I believe, had him as a 3-star, and in that cases, I think they were all correct. But he had this kid ranked ahead of, some really good Hakeem Williams, Jeremiah Love, some really good Shelton Sampson. They had AJ Harris at 87. That was a bad grade. They had that kid above Christian Gray. They had Brandon Innes as I think he's bad at evaluating receivers. Brandon Innes is the number 94 player in the country. I don't think Ryan Wingo is a top 100, a 5-star, but they have him at like 90 something on 3. Like there's just some really rough rankings, and it's not just, there's just some positions I just don't think he's very good at evaluating, and quarterback is absolutely one. And here's the other thing too. How do you have Aaron Noland, who again, Ryan, I'm extremely high on Aaron Noland, especially going to Ohio State. Like I like Aaron Noland a lot. I have no problem with Aaron Noland's ranking. Let's just be clear on this. How do you have Aaron Noland at number 43 and CJ Carr is number 193? Because they're basically identical players, except CJ has a stronger arm and is more athletic. It's like it's just bizarre. Like there has to be there's got to be something. I'm at the point now, Ryan, where it's like there's got to be something personal with you at this one. Like it's so bizarre and it's so far off of what everybody else has that it's like it's just got to be personal. Man. What's that?
He keeps falling too. He's going to be out of the top 200 soon.
Yeah, I mean it's just weird. There's no way there. Now you could argue, right? I think CJ's a 5-star, and I think depending on what your criteria is, you can make a case that CJ Carr's not a 5-star. Totally fine. Right, especially if you're someone who's looking at the NFL. I get that. But to not have him as a top 100 guy, is just bizarre to me. Like to me, he should at least be a top 50 guy. And again, if you wanted to have him around where you have Aaron Noland, because you're like, hey, look, I'm someone who's big into tools. That's why I have Dylan Raiola higher. It's why I have DJ Lagway higher. Even though they may not have the accuracy, but they have monster arms. Okay, fine. I'm cool. I can actually live with that because at least I can say, I understand it. I get it. I don't agree with it. Like Nico. I thought Nico was a little overrated last year. Didn't bother me because I understand why. He's got a phenomenal arm, and the upside is so great that he could end up making them all look like geniuses and be a top 5 NFL draft pick, right? I mean, if Nico goes to Tennessee and develops into a top 10 NFL draft pick, Ryan, would you be surprised? No, I wouldn't either. Is he that guy right now? No, nowhere close. No. Right? But with some of these kids, you look and say, I don't understand that one at all. There's just no rhyme or reason to why this ranking is what it is. And CJ's is that way. And there's a lot like that. I just think there are some positions he's really not good at evaluating. And that's the problem with having one person do an entire evaluation is I just don't think he's very good at it. So But I will say this again, I don't think it's a Notre Dame thing. I don't. And I know they had a lot of Notre Dame kids fall in the latest rankings. You had Kedron Young fell 10 spots, but he's still ranked way higher by On3 than anyone else.
Yeah.
Aeneas Williams dropped 21 spots. Micah Gilbert dropped 19 spots. Logan Thomas dropped 68 spots. Bronte Johnson dropped 11 spots. He completely dropped Kingston Viliama-Asa out of the top 300. He doesn't have him in his top 300. So again,
top 300.
Yeah,
what?
Yeah. He's also bad at linebacker. This is the same guy that dropped Jaden Alsbury and Drake Bowen down last year, right? So I mean, he's just bad at evaluating linebackers. But he also jumped Anthony Knapp up 21 spots. He ranks Anthony Knapp way higher than anybody else. And he also jumped Styles Prescott up from number 189 to 180. And he jumped Bryce Young up from number 237 up to number 195. So again, I don't think the guy has any anti-Notre Dame feelings. I don't. I just think he's bad at evaluating certain positions. Linebacker and receiver and quarterback being at the top of that list for me. But I haven't hated his cornerback grades. I disagree with some, but I can usually understand it. I disagree with his I think his defensive line grades are pretty decent. I think he's a pretty good offensive line evaluator. Definitely some. I think he tends to overrate offensive linemen nationally. But as far as the ranking of the offensive linemen, like he had Javin Williams ranked way higher than anybody else last year. Ryan, the kid going to Penn State.
Yep.
And as you know, I had no problem with that because I think that guy's a stud. Like I had no problem with him ranking Javin higher than everybody else.
I don't like thinking about
number
that
9 overall, that was a little too high for me.
I don't like thinking about that high school because it brings back Caleb Brewer memories.
Yeah,
so
very bad memories.
Yes.
Very bad memories. Yes. I'll ask this one, Ryan, because this is more of a you question. Jake Roosman asks, is Notre Dame still a potential landing spot for 2024 linebacker Chris Cole? He released his top 10 yesterday and had Notre Dame on the list.
I mean, it's one of those things where, Jake, like you release a top 10, right? And it's like these 10 are the schools that I've heard the most from, right? And the schools that have had some type of impact in me in this recruitment. No, we don't anticipate Notre Dame being a player for Chris Cole. That's just kind of where we are. I think that they had gained some traction and it was going in an okay direction, but I mean, it was just a little too late at that point. So, I mean, he's going to go to Penn State or stay down south more than likely. So that's kind of where we are right now.
We're going to stick with linebacker here for this next question, Ryan.
Okay. Charlie Weiss's last outlook. What happens if Bradley Shaw and Kingston Viliamo-Asa both go to other schools? Will Notre Dame just wait until next year?
I think what they'll do, Ryan, is they'll keep their eyes open during the season for some breakout type of player, right? But they'll also be perfectly okay, I think, staying on Kingston, right? I think they'll do that, staying on a couple guys that they really liked, and then focusing on next year because next year's class is so loaded. And they're actually in a decent position with now we don't know if they're going to be able to stay in a decent position, but they're actually in a decent position with next year's guys. And the other thing too is if Max Bulla hangs around for more than a year, which is all James Laurinaitis was here for, you're starting to hear his name a lot more to 25 kids. So I think they're wisely trying to have him say, hey, man, you got here late, the 24 kids. Like, I mean, got here late meaning like hired. You can't fault the guy for not recruiting kids to your school when he's not at your school. Yeah. But, you know, the 25 kids. But I would say that or 24 kids, but you're definitely seeing him more and more and more with 25 kids. So I think that is a bit of a factor as well.
Agree. I think that it's – because, Charlie, it is a good question, right? I mean, because there's the two linebackers that are on the board. That's the two linebackers on the board. And there is a possibility that you don't get either one. I mean, that is a possibility that you have to talk about and you have to be okay with. Not be okay with, but a reality that you have to realize is out there, right? So I think that for me, it's a big thing. And we've talked about this with a couple different positions. But, yes, I would keep my eyes open. Because there's always going to be those late risers. There's always going to be the kids during the evaluation period. You're like, I didn't know about that kid. And he's only committed to a lesser school that we know that maybe we could flip. Like Armel Mookham's an example, right? Like Armel, Stanford, cool. Meets all the foundational things we like, but we are higher than him. Let's get him out of there. So there's always going to be kids like that.
Right. Brandon Hillman's another guy they found late in the process. Yeah, guys like that. Yep. You definitely don't want to reach. You don't want to waste a scholarship, and then you can't take a fourth guy next year on a kid that you're just bringing in to fill a roster spot. I said, go to the portal for a year. I mean, that's what I would do before I would take that leap. Got a few more here, Ryan. We'll before we wrap up.
Mr. 2.0 says, seems people aren't excited enough about some players Notre Dame has landed. Case in point, is Logan Thomas not the archetype of what Notre Dame wants at the Viper position in terms of being an athletic tweener? He is. You're not wrong.
I think Mr. 2.0, I think part of the problem is just because I do think some of the players in this class are not ranked appropriately. I really do. Like,
I think the rankings
Ryan,
are terrible this year, man. Terrible.
They are. Here's an example. If Leonard, I'm gonna go down the list, and if Leonard Moore, Cole Mullins, I'm trying to think if there's anybody else I really want to bang on the table for, as far as in this regard. Maybe Styles Prescott, but I think like on 3, I think has Styles right about 180, right? Like that's I'm good with that because he's still kind of raw, but talented. But Leonard Moore, to me, should be a borderline top 100 guy. He's definitely a top 150 guy. Cole Mullins should be a top 100 guy, to me. If just those 2 kids alone were ranked appropriately, along with Bronte Johnson, just those 2 kids alone, then I think that the feeling people have about this class would be a lot different. If Bodie Cahoon was ranked on his upside and not where he is right now, and they'll do that with other guys, Ryan. They'll rank other players based on their upside. I say, okay, well, like, I think the feeling of him, it would also factor into it. So I think that there's some Notre Dame kids in this class, and I think Cole Mullins is the biggest one for me, because at least Rivals somewhat has Leonard Moore appropriately ranked. Like I think Leonard Moore should, right? He's dropped down to the 190s recently. Yeah. That's too low, but it's not I mean, Ryan, if you're like within a 50 or so range outside the top 100, I can live with that. I think he should be inside the top 150, but it's not nuts. It's slightly lower than I think it should be. But everybody else has him as a 3-star.
Yeah.
And I watch. Have you watched Chris Jones on film by chance?
Chris Jones, the linebacker,
the kid from Virginia.
Yeah.
Thoughts on him compared to Bodie Cahoon?
Good, solid player, not as much upside.
Right.
Yeah.
Right, but decently high floor, right?
Yeah.
To me, Bodie Cahoon should have his ranking. Now, I think 247 has him ranked a little too high at 102. But like Rivals 139, on 3 293. Like, to me, I would much rather have Bodie Cahoon in this class and have him ranked somewhere in between those 2 spots for me. Like, he's a top 250 kid for me, just on talent alone, to me. But for some reason, he's not. He's just only one of the service has him as a 4-star. So I think those 3 guys are probably the most egregious. I have Cole Mullins as a top 100 player. If Cole Mullins was appropriately ranked, like Logan Thomas for me is another one. Part of the problem, Mr. 2.0, is he's actually ranked somewhat high, top 200 caliber player, which is about where he should be. He's so raw, Ryan. I can't justify having him higher than top 150, right? Yeah. I can't. And 169 is a little low, probably for me, but it's within the range of I'm comfortable with. I'd probably have him like 140 to 160. It's probably where I have him right now, Logan, because he is kind of raw. But when I look at it, though, he's not getting talked a lot about because people are still emotionally upset about not getting Elijah Rushing and Justin Scott. That's part of it. Is people are still emotional about Al Washington's. This is a terrible defensive line class. No, they came up a guy short at D tackle. This is a heck of a defensive end class, right? I mean, it is, in my opinion, especially for Notre Dame. But if Cole Mullins was ranked appropriately, the view that people will have of Elijah Rushing as a need, or Malachi Williams as a need, would be different, in my opinion. Like, that's what it comes down to for me. So we can say we don't care about recruiting rankings, but in reality, people do. That's right. Because that drives the agenda of where a kid, your feelings about a kid. If Cole Mullins was ranked nationally where I have him, the view of this defensive line class is completely different. Completely different. Because now you have 3 4-star top 200 kids, and one being a top 100 kid in Cole Mullins. We just say, man, that Justin Scott was a big loss, but man, that's still a pretty good group. I think they should go after another one, but that's a pretty darn good group. But I just think the ranking is way off. Like, same with Peter Jones. Like, how some people have him as a 3-star.
Yeah, it's weird.
Like, Rivals has Styles Prescott as a middle of the road 3-star. Like, okay, I get if you want to have him like not in your top 250 because he's still raw, that's fine. But not even a 4-star, not even a high 3-star. What are we doing here? Like, Isaiah Canion's that way. How do you have him in the top 100 in one service and the other one has him as a middle of the road 3-star? It's so screwy. It really is nuts, man.
It feels more this year than last year too. It's
it really does.
very
It does. It really is, man. It really is. It's got a few more here.
Jason Smith, who are your two 2024 guys, one defense, one offense, who take biggest jumps in senior year of high school? That's a good question. We had this one asked similarly recently.
Yeah. So of the Notre Dame class, right? We're referring to here.
Yep. Biggest jumps. I think defensively, I think Bodie Cahoon's my pick because I think that he's going to be in his first full year as a linebacker.
Yeah.
I think people forget about that. He was literally a safety to start the 2022 season. So I'm excited to see Bodie in a full year at linebacker. Offensively, man, that's a great question. Offensively, I don't. I have less of.
I think it's going to be Styles
Prescott
for me because he's put on like 20 pounds. He was up in the 280s during his visit. I think he's going to have a really good senior year. Stuff because CJ's already ranked really high. Aeneas is already incredibly productive. Kedron's already incredibly productive. Cam and Micah. The other one maybe is Micah Gilbert. I could see him having put up really good numbers and be a guy that has a big senior year jump because we're talking about on the field, right? Not rankings. We're talking about on the field. Defensively, Ryan, I have I think Logan Thomas is going to have a monster year this year. I think they're going to have him use him more as an edge guy this season.
Yeah.
I think we've seen him fill out a lot and the speed. I think he's going to have a big year. You know who I hope has a big jump as a senior? Carson Hobbs.
Yeah.
I really hope he has a big jump as a senior. I'd really like to see that.
I hope Anthony Knapp takes a big step forward this year for me because I'm not
it's a good one.
Biggest Anthony Knapp guy of all time, but we shall see.
Agree.
We had Patrick King who said, war game play. Sam Hartman goes out in the second half of the Ohio State game. Notre Dame wins. Returns at the bowl time. Who is his replacement?
So that's game 5.
Yep.
I'm going to go Kenny Minchie.
Yeah, I would also go Kenny Minchie.
Yep.
I would also go
That's
Kenny
what
Minchie.
I'm going with. Yep.
We had a question from Ray Holcraft. What's up, Ray? How has the evolution changes in pro football over the last 15 to 20 years impacted individual positions on defense in college football? And how has the impacted recruiting at Notre Dame, if at all? Wow, that's a great question.
I don't know. This is going to sound weird. I don't think that the changes in pro football have impacted positions on defense in college football. I think the changes and evolution in college football has changed defenses in college. Like you can't really run what Notre Dame ran in 2012 anymore because there's no teams that do that anymore. I mean, who does that match up against? You can't even say Wisconsin anymore, Ryan. I mean, they're going to an air raid. Who does that match up against anymore? You'd be playing literally 95% of the game in your nickel package. So I think it has to do with that. I think that we're seeing, because of the spread, the air raid, those two things, and I do view them as different, even though there's some overlap in some areas, but you have to get more guys in the field. You can't run a 4-3 like you did, like the Denver Broncos 1998, 798 teams. We've talked about that, right? Like the three starting linebackers, right? They had Bill Romanowski, Alan Aldridge, and not John Mobley.
Mobley. Yeah.
John Mobley.
Yeah.
As your three linebackers. And then Aldridge left, I think, the next year, and Glenn Cadrez took over, or maybe it's vice versa. But Roman, you won't see that now. You won't see three linebackers like that. I mean, they were all three inside linebackers, right? And you won't see that now. You can't line up with that kind of personnel unless you have some freak as one of your linebackers. But so I think it's more of the changes. And how does it impact the recruiting at Notre Dame? It's put a greater emphasis for Notre Dame on you have to get more skill now, Ryan. I mean, you have to get more athletes. You can't be that big bully ball team with the big physical mantis and a bunch of those guys. You can have a manti, but the guys around him better be Jeremiah Wusu-Koramoahs and Drew Tranquils and Jaden Osbury's and Drake Bowens and Nolan Ziegler's and Jalen Sneed's, right? I mean, it can't be like you won't see Carlo Calabrese and Manti Te'o starting side by side anymore. Right. Not on a team that wants to be on good on defense. You can have Manti, but you can't have Carlo. So I just think it's that, and I think we're going to where there's more of a need for DBs than there used to be, mean, you have to have 5 and 6 DB packages. I mean, who can get away with not having a nickel and a dime in some degree nowadays, Ryan? And I'm not talking about like last 2 minutes of a game. I'm talking about as your base defense against some teams. I mean, you kind of have to now. So for me, I think those are the biggest things. Is it's just and then what that does is for Notre Dame at some positions, the athletes you need are no longer from your backyard. You now have to recruit nationally even more than you had before. You used to recruit nationally because you could, right? Now you have to recruit nationally even more so than they did before because of those changes. So that's my answer to it, Ryan. I don't know what you think. I don't know what you think about that one.
I think that it has eased the uneasiness of tweeners in today's game is how I would kind of phrase it.
It's a great point.
Running backs and wide receivers, the line has gotten blurred a little bit, and you can utilize that type of player. Chris Tyree, perfect example of a guy. Percy Harvin is another guy that's an example. Deebo Samuel going into the NFL, obviously, the trajectory. Defensively, especially with the 4-2-5, I mean, it wasn't long ago that 15 years ago to your question, Ray, 10 years ago to your question, Jalen Sneed would be a guy that some defensive coordinators would look at and be like, I don't know what to do with that 215-pound guy. Not sure what to do with him. He can't play inside linebacker at 210 pounds, and he's not a true safety. Where the heck do I put him? With the rover position, you know exactly where to put him now. Know exactly where to put him. And then if he grows bigger, then he can move inside. That's cool. Corners and safeties, that line has gotten blurred a little bit. Nickels outside corners, that line has gotten blurred a little bit. Wide receiver, tight end has gotten blurred a little bit. Yeah. Some of these positions have just gotten blurred, and I think there's more a easiness to adopting the tweeners, right? Oh, it's okay. You don't have exactly a 1% of a home, but I can use you in some capacity. I can use you, come here, play ball.
Ryan, it used to be you could build around linebackers in the NFL, especially. Like you could build around linebackers. Teams don't really build around linebackers anymore, right? Like to me, in a lot of ways, linebackers becoming like running back. I mean, 20, 30 years ago, you built your franchise. Unless you had like a Hall of Fame quarterback, you built your franchise around your ability to run the football and your linebackers.
Yep.
Now those are two of the most the positions that have a big role in that, linebacker and running back, are two of the most like, okay, well, we're not, it's like Jack Campbell from Iowa. We were a little surprised he went as high as he did just because, people view him as a two down linebacker in the NFL, right?
Yeah.
Like 20 years ago, 30 years ago, Jack Campbell's a top 10 overall draft pick. Easy.
Oh, yeah.
If not top 5. I mean, he was that good. I mean, 6'5", that speed and athleticism 30 years ago is a star. I mean, just star as far as how it's evaluated. Now, he was a phenomenal player in college. I'm more looking at the NFL type of it. You used to have, you coveted guys like that. Now it's like, wow, that guy got picked in the top 20. That's a surprise. Not because he wasn't a super talent. Right? Like I know, Ryan, that was your evaluation when he got picked. And it had nothing to do with you didn't think he was a phenomenal player. It's just that's just not how the NFL is anymore.
I had a high second round grade on Jack. I like Jack a lot.
Based on where 30 years ago, 20 years ago, you wouldn't have had that low of a grade on him. And I don't think you would have. It would have been a much higher grade because that's where the game was. Same with running backs. Yeah. Jahmyr Gibbs 20 years ago is not picked as high as he was picked. You'd have had a complete flip. Now the running backs like him are the coveted ones, and the every down backs that we saw in the past are the guys that fall. So it's really changed a lot, and it'll cycle again over the next 20 years. Well, I don't know where it'll cycle to, but it'll still continue to cycle. It always does. The game always evolves.
Yep,
it always does. Well, Ryan, that's going to do it, man, for today's show. Why don't you go ahead and take us out of here?
Yep. We appreciate you all so much for joining the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour today. If you missed the beginning of the podcast, we talked a lot about the running back group in 2025, previewed some of the more talented running backs that are born in Notre Dame, including a couple that are going to be visiting Notre Dame later this month. So make sure to go to boards@irishbreakdown.com. I have periodically over the last few days been putting more and more on the visitors list as far as guys that will be visiting for the July 30th recruiting barbecue. That is going to be a big event for Notre Dame this year. Already a crazy list, man. I feel like it's a pretty star-studded list at this point. So boards@irishbreakdown.com. We also had an interview with Rowan Byrne, offensive tackle out of Iona Prep in the state of New York during this podcast. So go back and listen to that. And of course, we hit the mailbag here at the end. So I want to thank everybody so much. Like, Subscribe to the podcast, 5-star reviews on any and all of your favorite podcast platforms. As I've already said, boards@irishbreakdown.com if you want continued recruiting and team intel throughout the rest of the summer. We're only 50-something days away from college football, folks. So thank you all for joining us today on the Notre Dame Recruiting Hour, a part of the Irish Breakdown podcast.